The rain fell in sheets over London, hammering against the Gothic windows of the Helsing Manor with the rhythmic persistence of a funeral drum. Inside the war room, Sir Integra Fairbrook Wingate's Helsing stood before a mahogany table scattered with classified documents, her sharp blue eyes scanning intelligence reports that had arrived via encrypted channels from the United States government. The photographs were disturbing even by Helsing standards. City streets littered with corpses, shambling figures with milky eyes and gaping mouths, and military barricades overwhelmed by masses of what appeared to be the living dead. "Raccoon City," Integra said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Population approximately 100,000. 3 days ago, reports of violent attacks escalated into complete communications blackout. The American government claims it's a localized terrorist incident, but their desperation suggests otherwise." She lifted one photograph closer to the candlelight. A man in a business suit, his flesh torn and rotting, hunched over the eviscerated remains of what might have been a woman. His jaw hung at an unnatural angle, teeth still embedded in decaying meat. From the shadows at the far end of the room, a voice emerged like silk drawn across broken glass. How delightfully nostalgic, the great plagues of the medieval era brought back by modern incompetence. ALUCARD stepped into the candlelight, his crimson duster coat flowing around him like congealed blood. The wide-brimmed hat cast his face in shadow, but his eyes, those ancient, crimson eyes, gleamed with predatory interest. "Though I must say the photographs lack a certain artistry. Where is the passion? The terror? These creatures look mindless." "Because they are," Integra replied, sliding another document across the table. "Our contacts in American intelligence have provided additional context under extreme confidentiality. The Umbrella Corporation, a pharmaceutical conglomerate with significant political influence, operates a research facility beneath the city. Approximately 1 week ago, a biological agent designated T-virus was released, either accidentally or deliberately. The virus reanimates dead tissue and overrides higher brain functions, creating what survivors are calling zombies." ALUCARD's smile widened, revealing the edge of elongated canines. "Zombies, how quaint. Humanity's scientific hubris attempting to replicate what nature has already perfected through predation and evolution." He picked up one of the photographs, studying it with the detached interest of a connoisseur examining inferior wine. "These are not true undead. I can smell the difference even through this paper. They are diseased meat puppets, nothing more. Ghouls without a master. Pathetic." "Pathetic or not, they've consumed most of Raccoon City's population," Integra said sharply. "But that's not why I'm sending you." She produced a sealed folder marked with biohazard symbols and the Umbrella Corporation logo. "Our intelligence suggests Umbrella has been conducting illegal bioweapons research for decades. The T-virus is merely their most visible failure. Reports from surviving military personnel describe creatures far more dangerous than shuffling corpses, something they're calling tyrants. Engineered bioweapons with superhuman strength and resilience." "Bioweapons," Alucard's tone dripped with contempt. "Humans creating monsters when true monsters walk among them freely. How very American." He took the folder, flipping through technical specifications, blurry reconnaissance photographs of hulking humanoid figures and classified military assessments. One image caught his attention, a gray-skinned giant with an exposed heart, its clawed hand punched through a reinforced steel door. Impressive structural modifications, but ultimately still flesh. Still mortal. Integra lit a cigar, the smoke curling around her stern features. "Your mission is threefold. First, Investigate whether Umbrella has somehow weaponized vampirism or created something supernatural in origin. Second, assess the threat level of their bioweapons. Third, she paused, her voice dropping to a razor's edge. Eliminate any evidence that could expose the supernatural world to mainstream scientific scrutiny. If Umbrella has stumbled onto vampire biology, we cannot allow that research to survive. And if they've simply created very convincing imitations, then consider this a safari, Integra said coldly. The American government is paying handsomely for our consultation. They believe we're sending a specialist in unconventional infectious diseases. Let them continue believing that. She stubbed out her cigar with finality. The organization has arranged your insertion via military transport. You'll be dropped on the outskirts of Raccoon City before dawn. Official records will list you as a CDC consultant. Unofficial reality is that you have complete operational freedom. ALUCARD's grin became something terrible and beautiful, like a snake unhinging its jaw before the kill. How long since I've had complete operational freedom, Integra? How long since you've let me truly hunt without restraint? Don't make me regret this, Integra warned. You are not there to indulge yourself. This is reconnaissance and threat assessment, not a massacre. Of course, Master. The title dripped with theatrical mockery, but beneath it lay absolute loyalty. ALUCARD bowed with exaggerated courtesy before dissolving into shadow and mist, his laughter echoing through the war room long after his form had vanished. Integra watched the darkness where he'd stood, a thin smile crossing her features. If Umbrella Corporation had truly created something that rivaled the supernatural, they would soon learn the difference between playing God and meeting one. The Blackhawk helicopter cut through storm clouds over the Arklay Mountains, its rotors struggling against wind shear that would have grounded civilian aircraft. Inside the cargo bay, ALUCARD sat perfectly still among crates of medical supplies and military equipment, the official cover for this insertion. The three-man crew avoided looking at him directly, their animal hindbrain recognizing predator, even if their conscious minds rationalized him as just another CDC specialist in an expensive red coat. 5 minutes to drop zone, the pilot's voice crackled through the comm system. Sir, I gotta advise against this. We're getting reports that the infection spread faster than projected. The city's gone dark. No radio traffic except military frequencies, and even that's breaking down. ALUCARD didn't respond, his eyes fixed on the window as Raccoon City came into view below. Even through the rain and darkness, he could see the fires scattered across the urban landscape like dying stars. Entire blocks burned unchecked. The street lights still functioned in some districts, illuminating scenes of chaos frozen in amber light, overturned vehicles, barricades of furniture and debris, and everywhere the shambling figures that had once been human. Jesus Christ, the co-pilot whispered. It's worse than the briefing photos. There must be thousands of them. Tens of thousands, ALUCARD corrected softly, his voice barely audible over the rotors. The entire city has become a feeding ground. How efficient. He could smell it even at this altitude, the stench of decay, fierce sweat, and something chemical underneath. The T-virus had a scent, sharp and artificial, like formaldehyde mixed with rotting flowers. It offended his senses the way cheap perfume might offend a sommelier. The helicopter descended toward a cleared landing zone on the outskirts, a shopping mall parking lot where scattered vehicles suggested a failed evacuation attempt. As they approached, figures began shambling toward the noise, drawn by the rotors like moths to flame. Dozens of them, their movements jerky and uncoordinated, arms outstretched in mindless hunger. LZ is compromised, the pilot shouted. We can't set down with hostiles. Then don't set down. Alucard stood, moving to the open cargo door. The wind tore at his coat, but he stood steady as if gravity were a suggestion rather than a law. I'll walk from here. We're 60 feet up. Then I'll have a short walk. Before anyone could protest, Alucard stepped out into empty air. He fell like a crimson comet, coat billowing around him, and landed in the center of the parking lot with an impact that cracked asphalt in a spiderweb pattern. The zombies closest to the impact were thrown backward, their fragile bodies broken by the shockwave. Alucard straightened slowly, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeves, and surveyed his welcoming committee. 20, 30, 40 of them converged from all directions, a shambling mob of former humanity. Office workers still in business attire, their ties askew and shirts torn. A woman in a blood-soaked nurse's uniform, her name tag reading Rachel through the gore. A police officer missing half his face, one hand still clutching an empty service pistol. They moaned, a collective sound like wind through a graveyard, and stumbled toward him with single-minded hunger. So these are Umbrella's zombies, Alucard mused, drawing his casual from its holster with languid grace. The massive .454 casual semi-automatic pistol gleamed like polished silver in the firelight. Let's see if they die like proper corpses or if they're stubborn about it. The first zombie reached him, a grotesquely obese man whose belly had split open, intestines trailing behind him like obscene streamers. Alucard didn't flinch as rotting hands grabbed for his coat. He simply raised the casual and fired. The report was deafening, echoing across the parking lot like thunder. The zombie's head exploded in a spray of black ichor and brain matter, the blessed silver rounds punching through necrotic tissue with contemptuous ease. The body dropped, truly dead this time, and Alucard's smile widened. Disappointing. One shot, one kill. Where's the challenge? He began walking toward the city proper, firing methodically as zombies closed in. Each shot was placed with surgical precision, forehead, temple, brainstem. Bodies dropped in his wake and he never missed, never hesitated, never showed the slightest concern for the mob pressing around him. You're not undead. You're not even ghouls. You're meat that doesn't know it's dead yet. A zombie lunged from his blind side. A teenage boy with a skateboard still strapped to his back, his throat torn open. Alucard didn't turn. Shadow erupted from his coat like living tentacles, spearing through the zombie's chest and lifting it into the air. The body twitched once before the shadow withdrew, dropping the corpse like discarded refuse. Hollow, Alucard said with genuine disgust. No soul to consume, no will to break, no fear to savor. You're less than cattle. At least cattle know they're about to die. He holstered the casual and continued walking, letting the shadows do the work. Black tendrils erupted from his form, skewering zombies with casual brutality, tossing bodies aside like a child scattering toys. Within minutes, the parking lot was carpeted with truly dead corpses, and Alucard stood at the entrance to Raccoon City proper, untouched by blood despite the carnage. Above, the Blackhawk circled once more, the crew staring in shocked silence at the slaughter below. The pilot keyed his radio with shaking hands. Command, CDC specialist has entered the city. Hostiles neutralized. Jesus Christ, all of them. Request immediate extraction and... Negative, Alucard's voice cut through the frequency, though he held no radio. The crew jumped at the sound. Tell your superiors I'll report when the reconnaissance is complete. Do not send extraction. Do not send reinforcements. And gentlemen, his voice dropped to a predatory purr, forget what you saw here tonight, for your own sake. The Blackhawk banked hard and fled into the storm, leaving Alucard alone in the burning city. He walked down Main Street, his boots echoing on blood-slicked pavement. Raccoon City had been a prosperous American town once, tree-lined streets, local businesses, the kind of place where everyone knew their neighbors. Now it was a charnel house. Bodies lay everywhere, some still moving feebly, others torn apart by their former friends and family. Storefronts were smashed, their goods scattered and trampled. A fire truck sat abandoned in an intersection, its crew nowhere to be seen. This is what happens when humans play with forces they don't understand, Alucard mused, examining a pharmacy that had been looted and set ablaze. We vampires kill out of necessity, out of our nature as predators. But this, he gestured to the devastation, this is what happens when science divorces itself from morality, when profit matters more than human life. A sound caught his attention, not the moaning of zombies, but something different. Gunfire. Deliberate, controlled three-round bursts coming from several blocks north, and underneath it, human voices shouting tactical commands. Survivors. Alucard's smile returned, sharp and interested. Well, some cattle still have teeth. He began moving toward the sound, his supernatural senses tracking the battle like a bloodhound scenting prey. The gunfire intensified, then cut off abruptly with screams. He rounded a corner into an alleyway and found a massacre in progress. 3 people, 2 men and a woman, all in civilian clothing but carrying themselves like trained operators, had made a stand behind an overturned delivery truck. They were surrounded by at least 50 zombies, the press of bodies overwhelming their defensive position. The woman fired her last magazine, dropping 3 zombies before the slide locked back empty. "Reload," she shouted, but even as the words left her mouth, zombies clambered over the truck. Rotting hands grabbed her tactical vest, pulling her into the mob. "Claire!" One of the men lunged forward, trying to pull her back, but there were too many. The zombies bore them both down, teeth finding flesh, and their screams became wet gurgles. The third survivor, a young man with a police uniform and blood-soaked rookie badge, stood frozen in horror. His handgun trembled in his grip, pointing uselessly at the feeding frenzy. He didn't notice the zombie approaching from behind. A massive butcher still wearing his apron, cleaver raised high. Alucard moved. One moment he was 20 feet away. The next, he was between the rookie and the butcher zombie, his hand casually gripping the creature's wrist as the cleaver descended. The zombie's arm crumpled like paper in Alucard's grasp, bones pulverizing, and Alucard drove his other hand through the creature's chest with contemptuous ease. He withdrew his arm, the zombie's heart, still beating sluggishly despite decomposition, clutched in his palm. "Fascinating," Alucard said, examining the organ. "The virus keeps minimal cellular activity functioning even after catastrophic tissue death, crude but effective." He crushed the heart and dropped the zombie, which finally stopped moving. The rookie cop spun around, his gun now pointed at Alucard with shaking hands. "Don't move. Hands where I can see them. Are you Jesus Christ? Your eyes, what are you?" Alucard tilted his head, studying the young man with the detached interest of an entomologist examining an insect. Quite rude, pointing a weapon at someone who just saved your life, but I suppose trauma excuses poor manners. He glanced at the feeding zombies still tearing apart the rookie's companions. "Your friends are dead, or they will be soon. The virus works quickly once bloodborne transmission occurs." "No, we can still." The rookie took a step toward the mob, but Alucard's hand shot out, gripping his shoulder with enough force to stop him completely. "They're gone," Alucard said flatly. What walks away from that feeding frenzy won't be your friends. It will be more of these. He gestured dismissively at the zombies. Now you have a choice. Stand here and join them in death, or follow me and perhaps survive long enough to regret it. As if to punctuate his words, one of the zombies raised its head from the feeding, and the rookie saw Claire's face, or what remained of it. Her jaw worked soundlessly, teeth stained with her own blood, and her eyes had already glazed over with the milky film of infection. The rookie's gun finally lowered, his face pale with shock. What are you?" "A monster," Alucard said with perfect honesty. "But unlike these pathetic imitations, I'm a monster with standards. Come, we're wasting time, and I detect something far more interesting than shambling corpses several blocks ahead." He began walking, not bothering to check if the rookie followed. Behind them, the zombies continued feeding, and somewhere in the burning city, something roared, a sound too deep and too powerful to be human. Alucard's smile widened into something terrible. Finally, something worth killing. The rookie cop stumbled after Alucard, his legs moving on autopilot while his mind struggled to process what he'd just witnessed. The stranger in the red coat moved through the infected city like he owned it. No hesitation, no fear, just predatory confidence that seemed to repel the shambling corpses. Zombies that should have attacked veered away at the last moment, some evolutionary instinct warning them that this particular prey was actually an apex predator. "Name," Alucard said without looking back, stepping over a dismembered corpse with the casualness of someone avoiding a puddle. "What?" the rookie's voice cracked. "Your name. If you're going to follow me through this charming apocalypse, I should know what to call you. Or would you prefer Rookie for the remainder of your presumably short life?" Leon Kennedy." He swallowed hard, tightening his grip on his Matilda handgun, barely 3 magazines left. "Raccoon City Police Department. Today was supposed to be my first day." Alucard laughed, a rich sound that echoed off the burning buildings. "First day, how deliciously tragic. Welcome to your career, Officer Kennedy. I'm afraid your pension benefits may be somewhat limited." He paused at an intersection, crimson eyes scanning the darkened streets. The fires cast dancing shadows that made it impossible to tell corpses from the moving infected. "Tell me, Leon, what exactly happened here? The official reports are frustratingly vague." Leon's training tried to reassert itself. Don't share classified information with civilians. But one glance at Alucard's inhuman eyes destroyed that protocol. Whatever this creature was, civilian didn't apply. Umbrella Corporation. They have a research facility under the city. Some kind of biological weapon got loose. The T-virus turns people into those things. He gestured at a cluster of zombies feeding on what might have once been a family. It spread through the water supply, the ventilation systems. Whole city got infected in less than 72 hours. "Umbrella," Alucard repeated, tasting the word. What a benign name for an organization creating such magnificent horror, though I suppose Apocalypse Incorporated wouldn't pass corporate branding standards. He began walking again, following some invisible trail. "And I assume the authorities are planning a solution. Quarantine, evacuation." Evacuation failed. The military set up perimeters, but the infected broke through. "Last I heard, they were talking about," Leon's voice dropped to a horrified whisper, "sterilization protocols." "Ah, cleansing fire to hide corporate sins. How very efficient." Alucard's tone held no judgment, merely observation. "Umbrella will sacrifice this entire city to bury their mistakes. 100,000 souls erased from existence, and the survivors will be labeled conspiracy theorists if they speak of bioweapons." He stopped suddenly, head tilting. We have company, something larger than the rabble. Leon raised his weapon, scanning the darkness. Where? I don't see. The wall exploded. Concrete and rebar burst outward in a shower of debris as something massive punched through the side of a department store. Leon threw himself backward, barely avoiding being crushed by falling masonry. When the dust cleared, he found himself staring at a nightmare-given flesh. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, its skin a sickly gray-green stretched over grotesque musculature. The right arm was massively overdeveloped, fingers ending in claws the length of combat knives. Its heart, exposed and pulsating, jutted from the left side of its chest, veins throbbing with unnatural vigor. The creature's face was almost human, but twisted into a permanent snarl, eyes yellow and feral. Tyrant, Leon breathed, recognition flooding from half-remembered briefings about Umbrella's bioweapons program. T-002 model. Oh God, they actually made them. The Tyrant turned its gaze to Leon, and for a moment, he saw something that might have been intelligence flickering behind those yellow eyes. Then it lunged with impossible speed for something so massive, clawed hand reaching for Leon's head. ALUCARD appeared between them. He caught the Tyrant's wrist mid-swing, stopping 300 pounds of bioengineered murder like someone catching a thrown ball. The impact sent shockwaves through the pavement, cracking concrete, but ALUCARD's arm didn't budge. His smile was brilliant and terrible. Now this is more like it. He twisted, and the Tyrant's wrist broke with a sound like snapping timber. The creature didn't scream, it roared, a sound that shook windows and sent nearby zombies fleeing in mindless panic. Its other hand lashed out, claws raking across ALUCARD's chest and tearing through the red coat, drawing deep furrows through flesh. ALUCARD glanced down at the wounds, watching them seal instantly, flesh knitting together as if the injury had never existed. Impressive. You actually drew blood. That's more than these shambling corpses managed. He released the Tyrant's broken wrist and drove his fist into the creature's exposed heart. The blow should have pulverized the organ, but the Tyrant's enhanced physiology was too resilient. The heart deformed under the impact but didn't rupture. The creature staggered back, then came forward again with even greater fury, both arms swinging in a coordinated assault that would have liquefied a normal human. ALUCARD weaved between the strikes with supernatural grace, each movement minimal and precise. Fast, strong, durable, Umbrella's scientists have done impressive work. He caught both the Tyrant's wrists this time, holding the struggling bioweapon at arm's length. But you're still just meat and programming. No soul, no will. You're a weapon that thinks it's alive. The Tyrant's jaw unhinged, revealing rows of needle-like teeth, and it lunged forward to bite ALUCARD's face. ALUCARD simply headbutted it, the impact crushing the Tyrant's nasal cavity and snapping several teeth. The creature reeled, and ALUCARD kicked it through the ruined storefront, sending it crashing through display cases and mannequins. Leon, ALUCARD called without taking his eyes off the rising Tyrant. Your weapon, will it harm this creature?
Leon had been frozen in shock, but training overrode paralysis. He raised the Matilda, sighted on the Tyrant's exposed heart, and squeezed the trigger. 3 rounds punched into the pulsating organ, black blood spraying. The Tyrant staggered, clutching its chest, but remained standing. Insufficient, ALUCARD observed. As I suspected, this creature has been engineered to survive conventional weapons fire. Its heart is exposed deliberately, a psychological tactic to make enemies waste ammunition on a non-lethal target. He began walking toward the wounded Tyrant, which had dropped to one knee, breathing heavily. Clever design, but against something truly supernatural, All your corporate ingenuity is just expensive futility. The tyrant's eyes snapped up and its body began to change. The already grotesque musculature swelled further, bone spurs erupting from shoulders and spine. The damaged heart beat faster, pumping what looked like adrenaline-laced blood through its system. Claws lengthened, and when it stood again, it had grown another 6 inches, now towering over even ALUCARD. "Second stage transformation," Leon shouted. "It's going into berserker mode, get back." ALUCARD's grin became something inhuman, his eyes blazing like fresh blood in firelight. "Oh, you have more tricks. How delightful. Show me then. Show me what Umbrella's best bioweapon can do against a real monster." The transformed tyrant moved like lightning. Its clawed hand caught ALUCARD across the face, the force enough to decapitate a normal human. ALUCARD's head snapped to the side, and Leon saw 4 parallel gashes open across his cheek, blood flowing freely. But ALUCARD was laughing, a sound of pure, manic joy. "Yes, that's it. Fight, kill. Show me you're more than just an expensive puppet." He caught the tyrant's next strike, his own strength now matching the bioweapon's enhanced fury. They grappled in the center of the street, 2 titans of engineered and supernatural horror locked in mortal combat. The tyrant slammed ALUCARD through a parked car, the vehicle crumpling around him. ALUCARD erupted from the wreckage with shadows boiling around his form, no longer fully corporeal. Black tendrils lashed out, wrapping around the tyrant's limbs and lifting it into the air. The bioweapon thrashed, its enhanced strength tearing through several shadow constructs, but more replaced them instantly. "You're strong," ALUCARD said, his voice echoing with unnatural resonance. "But strength without purpose is just thrashing. Let me show you the difference between a weapon and a predator." He materialized directly in front of the suspended tyrant, thrust his arm through its chest, and gripped its spine. The tyrant's eyes widened, actual fear registering for the first time. ALUCARD's smile was gentle, almost tender. "Sleep now, failed experiment. You never asked to be born into this hell." He tore the spine out in one brutal motion, vertebrae separating with wet pops. The tyrant spasmed once, its enhanced biology fighting death even with catastrophic trauma, then finally went still. ALUCARD let the corpse drop, holding the bloody spine like a trophy, examining it with academic interest. Reinforced bone structure, enhanced nerve conductivity, redundant organ systems. He dropped the spine and wiped his hand on his coat, the blood absorbed into the crimson fabric as if it had never existed. Umbrella's scientists are talented, I'll grant them that. But they're trying to create apex predators through test tubes and microscopes. They don't understand that true monsters are born, not made. Leon slowly approached, his weapon still raised but trembling. "What? What the hell are you? You just killed a tyrant with your bare hands. That thing was designed to survive rocket launchers." ALUCARD turned to face him, and Leon saw that the wounds on his face had already healed completely, not even a scar remaining. "I told you already, Officer Kennedy. I'm a monster, a vampire if you prefer the classical terminology." He gestured to the dead tyrant. "That creature and I are both predators, both engineered, though by very different processes. The difference is that I have 500 years of experience being a monster. Umbrella's creation has 3 years of laboratory testing." "Vampire," Leon repeated numbly. "Right, of course. Why not? Zombies, bioweapons, and now vampires. My training definitely didn't cover this." "Few training programs do." ALUCARD's expression softened fractionally, not quite sympathy, but something approaching respect. "You've held yourself together admirably, Leon. Most humans would be catatonic by now. That suggests either exceptional courage or exceptional stupidity, possibly both. Before Leon could respond, a new sound cut through the night. Helicopter rotors, but heavier than civilian craft. Military transport. Both looked up to see a Chinook helicopter descending toward the Raccoon City Police Department building several blocks away, its spotlight cutting through the smoke and darkness. "Extraction team," Leon said, hope flaring in his voice. "They're pulling survivors out of the RPD, if we can reach them." "They won't let me board," Alucard interrupted. "I rather stand out, and answering questions about my nature would be tedious." He studied the helicopter's trajectory thoughtfully. "However, you should go. Find whatever authorities remain and tell them what you've seen here. Someone needs to bear witness to Umbrella's crimes." "What about you? What are you going to do?" Alucard's smile returned, predatory and eager. "I'm going to find the architects of this apocalypse, the scientists who thought they could play God with viruses and bioweapons. Umbrella's underground facilities extend throughout the city, and somewhere in those depths, I'll find answers to present to my master." He began walking away, then paused. "One more thing, Officer Kennedy. When you testify about what happened here, and you will testify, survivors always do, leave me out of your report. The world isn't ready to know that vampires walk among them. Say you survived through luck and training, nothing more." "Why?" Leon called after him. "Why help me at all if you're a monster?" Alucard didn't turn around, but his voice carried clearly through the burning streets. "Because unlike Umbrella, I don't pretend to be anything other than what I am. They create monsters and call it science, progress, evolution. I am a monster and call it truth. There's a certain honesty in that." He vanished into the shadows, leaving Leon alone with the corpse of the tyrant and the distant promise of rescue. Alucard moved through Raccoon City like a crimson ghost, following the scent of chemicals and fresh death toward the city's underground network. He'd let Leon go. The boy showed promise, and survivors would be needed to ensure Umbrella faced consequences. But Alucard's true mission was just beginning. The entrance to Umbrella's nest facility lay beneath the city's clock tower, hidden behind elaborate security that had been compromised by the outbreak. Zombies and infected creatures wandered the upper levels, but Alucard descended past them into deeper laboratories where fluorescent lights still flickered and computers hummed with data. Bodies littered the sterile corridors, scientists in white coats, security personnel in tactical gear, all bearing the marks of violent death. Some had been torn apart by bioweapons. Others showed signs of having turned into zombies before being put down by colleagues. A few had taken the coward's way out, bullet holes in their temples and pistols still clutched in rigor mortis grips. "A modern charnel house," Alucard mused, examining a laboratory where beakers of glowing liquid had shattered, their contents eating through the floor like acid. All this death in pursuit of profit and power. Humans truly are the most creative monsters. He found a computer terminal still active and began accessing files, his supernatural speed allowing him to process data faster than any human. Project reports scrolled past. T-virus development, test subjects, mortality rates, mutation vectors. Clinical language describing unspeakable suffering. Photographs of test subjects in various stages of infection. Men, women, even children, all sacrificed to Umbrella's ambitions. And then he found it, references to another project, G-virus. More potent, more controlled, capable of directed evolution rather than mindless necrosis. The lead researcher, Dr. William Birkin, had been working on it when the outbreak occurred. According to the logs, Birkin had been shot by Umbrella's own security forces when he attempted to flee with the G-virus samples. Shot but not killed, Alucard read aloud. His interest piqued, and he injected himself with the G-virus in desperation. Subject has since undergone multiple mutations and is believed to be responsible for catastrophic damage to the facility's lower levels. Last known location, Disposal Area B. He smiled, closing the terminal. A scientist who became his own experiment. How poetically appropriate. Let's see what Umbrella's hubris has birthed. The descent to the disposal area took him through increasingly damaged sections of the facility. Here, the bioweapons had broken containment entirely. He passed holding cells with shattered plexiglass, empty examination tables still bearing bloodstains, and monitoring equipment that sparked and flickered. The walls bore claw marks too large to be human, gouges that suggested something massive and powerful had torn through reinforced steel like tissue paper. In one corridor, Alucard encountered something new, not zombies, but sleek, muscular creatures that clung to the ceiling with adhesive talons. Their skinless bodies revealed raw muscle and exposed brains, tongues lolling from lipless mouths. They dropped from above with predatory precision, 5 of them surrounding him in a coordinated ambush. Lickers, Alucard identified, recalling Umbrella's files. Further mutations of the T-virus, enhanced strength, speed, and sensory perception. Blind but capable of tracking prey through sound and scent. One lunged at him, claws extended and tongue whipping forward like a spear. Much better than the shambling corpses. You actually have some instinct left. The battle was brief and brutal. The Lickers were fast enough to actually challenge him, their claws finding flesh before his regeneration closed the wounds. But they were animals, operating on enhanced predatory instinct without strategy or cunning. Alucard's shadows impaled 3 simultaneously. His casual blew apart the exposed brain of a 4th, and he caught the 5th by its tongue mid-strike, yanking it forward onto his waiting hand, which punched through its skull. "Disappointing," he said, dropping the corpse. "Fast but predictable. No creativity, no adaptation, just glorified attack dogs." He continued deeper, and the temperature began to rise. Steam vented from ruptured pipes, and the smell of chemicals grew overwhelming. Finally, he reached Disposal Area B, a massive chamber where failed experiments and contaminated materials were incinerated. The conveyor belts had stopped, leaving partially dissolved corpses and broken bioweapons scattered across the floor like a grotesque museum. And there, in the center of the carnage, he saw it. William Birkin, or what remained of him, had become something that defied biology. His body had mutated into a grotesque fusion of human and something alien. His torso split open to reveal a massive eyeball where his chest should be. His right arm had transformed into a massive claw with blade-like fingers, while smaller, vestigial limbs sprouted from his shoulders. His head lolled at an unnatural angle, one eye still human and filled with residual intelligence, the other replaced by cancerous growth. The creature that had been Birkin turned toward Alucard, and its mouth, stretched impossibly wide, formed words that were barely human. "Kill me, please." Alucard approached slowly, studying the abomination with clinical fascination. "Dr. William Birkin, I presume. Your files spoke highly of your genius. They failed to mention your desperation." He circled the mutated scientist, noting how the creature tracked him with its various eyes. "The G-virus grants rapid evolution in response to trauma, doesn't it? Each injury triggers new mutations, new adaptations. You sought to become the next step in human evolution." The Birkin thing lunged with startling speed, its bladed arm sweeping in a wide arc. Alucard dodged casually, and the blow carved a trench through the concrete floor. The creature's human eye focused on him, and more words bubbled up. Not human anymore. Monster, like you. Oh no, Dr. Birkin, Alucard said softly, his tone almost gentle. We are nothing alike. I'm a monster by nature, by choice, by ancient covenant between predator and prey. You are a monster by accident, by desperation, by the hubris of believing science could conquer biology's fundamental laws. He drew his jackal, the larger of his two pistols, designed for hunting regenerators and bioengineered abominations. I kill to feed, to survive, to fulfill my purpose. You created death on an industrial scale in pursuit of profit and called it progress. The Birkin thing attacked again, and this time Alucard met it head-on. They collided in the center of the disposal area, supernatural power against viral evolution, and for a moment, the outcome seemed uncertain. Birkin's mutations adapted in real time, his flesh hardening against Alucard's strikes, new limbs sprouting to replace severed ones. But adaptation took time, and Alucard had infinite patience. He tore off Birkin's mutated arm, and it regenerated. He destroyed the central eye, and it reformed. He impaled the creature with shadow constructs, and it pulled itself free, stronger than before. Each exchange pushed Birkin's mutations further, transforming him into something increasingly inhuman, increasingly powerful. Until finally, there was nothing left of William Birkin at all, just a mass of writhing flesh, countless eyes, and snapping jaws. The intelligence in that one human eye had been consumed by the virus's relentless evolution. Whatever Birkin had been died the moment he injected himself. This creature was just the virus wearing his corpse. Alucard stopped attacking and simply stood still, watching as the Birkin creature completed its transformation into something that barely resembled terrestrial biology. When it finally lunged one last time, Alucard released his true form, shadows erupting in a tidal wave of darkness, dozens of red eyes opening in the void. And from that darkness, his voice echoed with the weight of 5 centuries. Releasing control art restriction to level 2. The facility itself seemed to scream as Alucard's power flooded through it. The shadows consumed Birkin's mutated form completely, not just killing it but obliterating it on a molecular level. When the darkness receded, nothing remained but a small pile of ash and a single, still human hand that had somehow survived the transformation. Alucard picked up the hand, studying the wedding ring still on its finger. Dr. Birkin, husband, father, scientist, monster. He dropped it into the incinerator, which roared to life automatically. You wanted to evolve beyond humanity. Congratulations, you succeeded. And humanity is better off without what you became. As he turned to leave, movement caught his eye, security footage playing on a still-active monitor. The timestamp showed events from several hours ago. Umbrella Security Service operatives gunning down Birkin as he tried to flee with G-virus samples. And among those operatives, one figure stood out. Tall, blonde, wearing sunglasses even in the underground facility. He moved with inhuman speed and precision, his strikes perfectly calculated. When Birkin's blood splattered across his face, the man smiled, and even through the grainy footage, Alucard could see that smile held more than human malice. The figure paused, looked directly at the security camera, and removed his sunglasses. His eyes glowed an unnatural amber gold, the pupils slit like a cat's. Then the footage cut out. Alucard's smile returned, predatory and eager. Well, it seems Umbrella has created something more interesting than shambling corpses and mindless bioweapons after all. Someone who's enhanced themselves with their own viruses and retained their humanity, or at least their intelligence. He memorized the face from the footage. "I'll be meeting you soon, mysterious operative, and we'll see if you're worth hunting." He ascended from the facility, leaving its horrors behind, but carrying knowledge that would prove far more valuable than any bioweapon sample. Umbrella's true threat wasn't their zombies or tyrants. It was the humans who willingly transformed themselves into monsters while keeping their minds intact. Those were predators worth finding.
Dawn never came to Raccoon City. The fires had spread throughout the night, consuming entire districts and filling the sky with smoke so thick that even sunrise couldn't penetrate the pall. ALUCARD stood atop the clock tower, surveying the devastation with the detached appreciation of someone who had witnessed the Black Death, the siege of Constantinople, and countless other human catastrophes. This was different only in scale and speed, modern efficiency applied to medieval horror. His crimson coat snapped in the acrid wind as he consulted the data he'd extracted from the Nest facility computers. Umbrella's network extended far deeper than a single laboratory. Beneath Raccoon City lay a warren of interconnected facilities, research labs, testing chambers, specimen containment areas, and administrative centers. The Nest had been merely the most recent construction. The older installations dated back decades, some to the company's founding in the 1960s. A city built on a graveyard of corporate ambition, ALUCARD mused, accessing a schematic he'd downloaded to a stolen tablet. How appropriately American. Hide your sins underground where no one can see them and profit from the suffering. His finger traced a path through the digital maze. But every labyrinth has a center. Every conspiracy has architects. And Umbrella's true heart lies beneath the Arklay Mountains, their original facility where this nightmare began. The route would take him through the city's sewer system, past maintenance tunnels that Umbrella had quietly annexed over the years, and into installations that officially didn't exist. According to the files, the Arklay laboratory had been the birthplace of the T-virus, the testing ground for countless bioweapons, and the personal domain of Umbrella's executive researcher, Dr. James Marcus, who had died under mysterious circumstances years ago. Or had he? The files contained inconsistencies, redactions that suggested Marcus's fate was more complicated than official records claimed. And in a company that routinely reanimated the dead, mysterious death could mean many things. ALUCARD descended from the clock tower through the building's interior, passing floors where zombies had once worked as bank tellers, accountants, and secretaries. They shambled through cubicles in a grotesque parody of their former routines, some still clutching briefcases or coffee cups. One zombie sat at a desk, its rotting fingers clicking uselessly at a keyboard, trapped in muscle memory it no longer understood. Even in death, capitalism makes you work, ALUCARD observed darkly. At least when I create ghouls, I'm honest about enslaving them. The building's basement provided access to the city's sewer network, a concrete labyrinth that reeked of human waste, chemicals, and decay. The T-virus had thrived here, spreading through rats and contaminated water before ever reaching the human population above. Now the sewers were a hunting ground for things that had mutated in the dark, away from human eyes. ALUCARD waded through knee-deep effluent without concern, his supernatural nature making him immune to disease and infection. His night vision turned the darkness into clear grayscale, revealing the true extent of contamination. The walls were covered in some kind of biological growth, fleshy, pulsating matter that resembled both fungus and animal tissue. It seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with rhythmic regularity. "Fascinating," he said, touching the growth. It recoiled from his hand, the tissue blackening where he made contact as if burned. Viral biomass forming a colony organism. The T-virus doesn't just infect individuals. Given time, it creates entire ecosystems. He scraped a sample from the wall, storing it in a vial for later analysis. Integra would find this data valuable. A splash behind him. ALUCARD turned to see something massive moving through the water, a serpentine shape easily 40 feet long, its body covered in glistening scales. It surfaced briefly, revealing a reptilian head with too many eyes and a jaw filled with concentric rows of teeth like a lamprey. Giant sewer creature, ALUCARD said with amused recognition. Every apocalypse needs one. It's practically tradition. The creature lunged at him, jaws unhinging impossibly wide. ALUCARD caught its upper and lower jaw, holding the mouth open as it thrashed. Though I must say, Umbrella's version is particularly uninspired. Just a large alligator with extra mutations. Where's the creativity? He tore the creature's jaw apart, the bones separating with a wet crack. The beast's thrashing became spasmodic before it finally went still, its massive body blocking half the tunnel. ALUCARD stepped over it and continued deeper into the network. The sewers gradually transitioned into maintenance tunnels lined with pipes and electrical conduits. Here, the Umbrella Corporation's modifications became obvious. Security cameras, now dead, keycard locks, now useless, and biohazard warnings stenciled on the walls in English, Japanese, and German. Umbrella had been meticulous about documentation, which made following their trail almost trivially easy. He encountered more bioweapons as he progressed. Hunters, reptilian humanoids with razor-sharp claws and predatory intelligence, had made these tunnels their territory. They attacked in coordinated packs of 3 or 4, using ambush tactics and flanking maneuvers that suggested either training or instinctive pack behavior. ALUCARD found them moderately entertaining. They were fast enough to dodge some of his attacks, smart enough to retreat when injured, and vicious enough to press any advantage. But they were still animals, operating on enhanced instinct rather than true sapience. He killed them with efficient brutality, his shadows impaling them mid-leap or his bullets finding the weak points in their armored hides. One hunter managed to rake its claws across his throat, nearly decapitating him. ALUCARD felt his head loll backward, vertebrae severed, and laughed as his regeneration kicked in. Bone, muscle, and tissue knitted back together in seconds, and he grabbed the startled hunter by its throat. "You almost succeeded," he told it, his voice genuinely respectful. "That deserves acknowledgement before I kill you." He crushed its windpipe and let the corpse drop. "Much better than the zombies. You actually tried." The tunnels opened into a vast underground chamber that had been converted into a specimen storage facility. Massive cylindrical tanks lined the walls, each containing a different bioweapon suspended in preservation fluid. The tanks were labeled with alphanumeric designations: MA-121 Hunters, MA-124 Eliminators, mantis-like creatures with blade arms, T002 through T011, various tyrant models, and dozens of failed prototypes that had never seen deployment. ALUCARD walked among them like a visitor in a museum of nightmares. Some specimens were clearly dead, their tissues breaking down despite the preservation chemicals. Others seemed merely dormant, and he could swear he saw movement behind their closed eyelids, dreams, perhaps, or residual neural activity keeping minimal consciousness alive. One tank held something that made him pause. The label read, "Lisa TREVOR Subject 1 Priority Containment." The creature inside was humanoid but grotesquely deformed, its face covered by what appeared to be other faces stitched together like a patchwork mask. Chains bound its limbs, but even in suspended animation, its muscles strained against the restraints with terrifying strength. Subject 1, ALUCARD read from the attached data terminal. Female, age, 43 years as of last examination, but the notes indicate she's been in umbrella custody since childhood. His eyes scan the logs and his expression, usually amused or predatory, darkened into something genuinely angry. Daughter of George Trevor, architect of the Spencer Mansion, taken as collateral when Trevor learned too much about Umbrella's true purpose. Subjected to T-virus experiments at age 14, has survived every viral strain, every bioweapon implantation, every torture Umbrella could devise. They used her as a test bed for decades. He placed his hand against the glass, and Lisa Trevor's eyes snapped open, milky white and utterly insane, but still somehow aware. She saw him and pressed her chained hand against the glass from the inside, matching his gesture. A sound emerged from behind her mask of stolen faces, not a roar or growl, but something that might have been a sob. Still human enough to suffer, Alucard said quietly. Still aware enough to know what's been done to you. Umbrella didn't just create monsters, they broke something that should never be broken, a child's innocence, a human soul. His crimson eyes blazed with genuine fury. I am a monster by nature and choice. I kill to feed and survive. But this, he gestured to Lisa's tank and the dozens of others, this is evil wearing a laboratory coat and calling itself science. He considered destroying the tank, releasing her from this purgatory. But the data logs were clear. Lisa Trevor was too dangerous to be allowed freedom. The viral mutations had made her practically immortal and impossibly strong. She'd killed dozens of Umbrella personnel during containment breaches, and not even direct headshots could put her down permanently. Her body had adapted to regenerate from any trauma, using the stolen genetic material from countless experiments. I'll come back for you, Alucard promised, his voice carrying through the preservation fluid. When Umbrella falls, and it will fall, I'll ensure you finally die with dignity. That's the only mercy I can offer. Lisa Trevor's hand remained pressed against the glass as he walked away, and he could feel her eyes tracking him until he left the chamber. The passage beyond the specimen storage led to what appeared to be an administrative section, offices, conference rooms, and laboratories dedicated to data analysis rather than physical experimentation. Umbrella had spared no expense here. The furnishings were expensive, the equipment state-of-the-art even by modern standards. Whoever worked in this facility had been important. Alucard found a central computer terminal that still had power, its screen displaying the Umbrella Corporation logo, a red and white umbrella with curved handle. How innocuous, how deliberately misleading. He accessed the system using passwords he'd extracted from the Nest facility, diving into layers of encrypted data. What he found was damning beyond even his expectations. Umbrella wasn't just a pharmaceutical company conducting illegal bioweapons research. They were an international conspiracy dating back to the aftermath of World War II. The company's three founders, Oswell E. Spencer, James Marcus, and Edward Ashford, had discovered the progenitor virus in a remote African flower and spent decades weaponizing it. Their goal wasn't merely profit, but something far more grandiose: controlled human evolution. Spencer, in particular, harbored delusions of godhood. His internal memos spoke of creating a new world order, where biological enhancement separated humanity into rulers and ruled. The T-virus was merely the first step. More advanced variants, G virus, T veronica, Ouroboros, were in development, each designed to create superior humans, while the unworthy masses were culled through bioweapon deployment. A pharmaceutical company with dreams of eugenics and genocide, ALUCARD said, his voice dripping with contempt. How very 20th century. Spencer wants to be a vampire lord without understanding what that actually means. He wants immortality and power without sacrifice, without the hunger, without the eternal damnation that comes with it. He downloaded the data, ensuring copies for multiple organizations. Umbrella must burn. Not because of what they've created, but because they've perverted the natural order. Monsters should be born, not manufactured on assembly lines. He found references to other facilities scattered across the globe, underwater laboratories, Antarctic research stations, European mansions converted into testing grounds. Umbrella's reach extended far beyond Raccoon City. This outbreak was just one failure among many, and the company's leadership was already planning to contain the damage through government lobbying, media manipulation, and if necessary, strategic assassinations of witnesses. But one file caught his particular attention, a personnel record for Albert Wesker, the figure he'd seen in the security footage executing Dr. Birkin. According to the data, Wesker had been a senior researcher with Umbrella before being assigned to infiltrate the Raccoon City Police Department's SDARS unit. He'd betrayed his team during an incident at the Spencer Mansion months ago, leading them into a bioweapon ambush while attempting to collect combat data. Wesker had allegedly died during that mission, killed by a tyrant, but the file continued past his death date. He'd injected himself with an experimental virus, the prototype virus developed by William Birkin, that granted superhuman abilities, enhanced strength, speed, regeneration, and most intriguingly, the capacity to retain full human intelligence and appearance. "So that's what I sensed," ALUCARD murmured, studying Wesker's photograph. The man's cold, calculating expression radiated ambition and intelligence. A human who successfully merged with a virus and came out stronger. Not a mindless bioweapon or pathetic zombie, but a new form of predator. His smile returned, sharp and eager. "Now you're interesting, Albert Wesker. Where are you hiding?" The file indicated Wesker had gone rogue from Umbrella, pursuing his own agenda. He'd been spotted retrieving combat data and bioweapon samples from various outbreak sites, selling information to rival organizations, and building his own network of contacts. He was playing a dangerous game, staying ahead of both Umbrella's cleanup crews and government agencies hunting bioterrorists. "A rival monster," ALUCARD said with satisfaction. "Someone who might actually provide entertainment. I was beginning to think this entire city was populated by victims and failures. But you, Wesker, you're a predator who understands the game." He closed the terminal and prepared to move deeper into the facility. "I'll find you eventually, and when I do, we'll see if your viral evolution can stand against 5 centuries of vampiric power." As he left the administrative section, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Red emergency lights bathed the corridors in crimson, and automated security systems flickered to life. A computerized voice echoed through speakers. "Sterilization protocol initiated. Facility will be purged in T-60 minutes. All personnel evacuate immediately." ALUCARD tilted his head, listening to distant rumbling as incendiary charges armed themselves throughout the complex. Umbrellas erasing evidence. How predictable. He consulted his stolen schematic, finding the fastest route to the Arclay laboratory proper. An hour is plenty of time, and if they think fire will stop me, they clearly don't understand what a vampire is. He moved with supernatural speed now, racing through corridors as the facility began its systematic self-destruction. Doors sealed behind him, vents released toxic gas, and fire suppression systems activated in reverse, spraying accelerant instead of water. Umbrella had designed this purge to leave nothing behind, not even bones. But Alucard was smoke and shadow when he chose to be, flowing through sealed doors, ignoring flames that would have incinerated humans, and laughing as chemicals that should have been lethal washed over him harmlessly. The facility's automated defenses were designed for humans and bioweapons, not for something that had walked the Earth for half a millennium. He reached the Arclay Laboratory's central chamber, a massive cathedral-like space dominated by a single enormous tank. Unlike the specimen containers in the storage area, this one was clearly meant for something far more significant. The tank was empty now, but residue on the glass and sediment at the bottom suggested recent occupancy. And carved into the floor around the tank were symbols Alucard recognized: alchemical sigils, occult formulae, and ritualistic patterns that had nothing to do with conventional science. Someone at Umbrella had been dabbling in actual supernatural research, trying to merge biology with the arcane. Well, Alucard breathed, kneeling to examine the symbols. Umbrella's founders weren't just scientists, they were occultists. They found the progenitor virus and recognized it for what it truly was, not a natural phenomenon, but something that existed on the boundary between life and death, science and magic. His eyes widened with genuine surprise. They weren't trying to create bioweapons. They were trying to manufacture artificial vampires. That changed everything. If Umbrella understood the supernatural principles underlying viral infection, if they'd been attempting to codify and replicate vampirism through scientific means, then they were far more dangerous than Integra had suspected. They weren't just corporate criminals. They were heretics attempting to steal immortality from its rightful holders. A sound made him turn. From the shadows at the chamber's edge, something moved. Not a bioweapon or zombie, but something that carried itself with eerie grace. It emerged into the emergency lighting, and Alucard found himself facing a young man who appeared barely 20, dressed in tattered formal attire from decades past. His skin was pale, his eyes filmed over with cataracts, and leeches crawled through his hair and clothes. But when the young man smiled, Alucard saw intelligence behind those blind eyes. Malevolent, insane intelligence. "A visitor," the young man said, his voice carrying echoes of multiple tones as if several people spoke through one throat. "How rare, how delightful. No one comes to the Arclay Laboratory anymore. Mother Umbrella abandoned us when we became inconvenient." He tilted his head at an unnatural angle. "But you're not Umbrella, you smell wrong. You smell old, ancient, like death that never died." Alucard's smile became genuine, delighted. "And you smell like a failed experiment that learned to think. What are you exactly? You're not a zombie, too much intelligence. Not a typical bioweapon, too much personality. Something else. Something that went wrong in an interesting way." "I am what happens when the Queen Leech infects a human host with memories intact," the young man, the creature said. "I am Dr. James Marcus, founder of Umbrella, murdered by my colleagues and reborn through viral symbiosis. I am Legion, for we are many. And I am very, very angry at what Umbrella has become." The leeches in his hair writhed more actively, and Alucard realized they weren't parasites. They were part of him, extensions of his distributed consciousness. "Marcus," Alucard repeated, recognizing the name from the files. "The T-Virus's creator, betrayed by Spencer and Wesker. You've been hiding down here for years, haven't you? Planning revenge, building your strength." He gestured to the facility around them. Did you trigger Raccoon City's outbreak? Marcus's smile widened grotesquely. I released the T-virus into the city's water supply 2 weeks ago. Every death, every transformation, every scream, all of it is justice for what Umbrella did to me. Spencer wanted to play God. I've shown him the consequences of divine ambition. His blind eyes somehow focused on ALUCARD with unnerving accuracy. But you're not here to stop me. You're here because you're curious. You want to understand what Umbrella truly is. I'm here because my master sent me to investigate supernatural activity, ALUCARD corrected. But yes, I'm curious. You've achieved something remarkable, maintaining identity and intelligence after viral infection and death. Most creatures either lose themselves completely or become simple-minded ghouls. You're neither. Because I embraced what I became, Marcus said, beginning to circle ALUCARD like a predator. I didn't fight the transformation. I didn't cling to my humanity. I accepted that Dr. James Marcus was dead and something new was born. The Queen Leech gave me immortality, distributed consciousness, and freedom from human weakness. His voice dropped to a whisper filled with religious fervor. I am evolution incarnate. I am what Umbrella dreamed of creating but could never understand. The facility shook as the first incendiary charges detonated somewhere above them. Marcus glanced upward with mild annoyance. Umbrella's final solution. Burn the evidence, bury the truth, and move on to the next atrocity. But I won't die here. I've already prepared my escape. The question is, he turned back to ALUCARD, are you my enemy or my ally? ALUCARD considered the creature before him. Marcus was abomination, an affront to natural order, a human who'd successfully merged with a parasite and retained sapience. He was everything Umbrella had tried to create and failed at dozens of times, and he was utterly, completely insane. But he was also the key to understanding Umbrella's deepest secrets, and more importantly, he was entertaining. Neither, ALUCARD said finally. I'm an observer. You want revenge on Umbrella. I have no objection. You want to burn this facility to the ground. It's already happening. But if you threaten innocence or attempt to spread your virus beyond Raccoon City, I'll hunt you down and destroy you. Consider that a professional courtesy from one monster to another. Marcus laughed, a sound like buzzing insects. Fair enough. Then allow me to offer a gift, observer, information that your master will find valuable. He gestured to a computer terminal near the empty tank. Umbrella's complete research data is stored there. Everything from the progenitor virus's discovery to their most classified projects. Take it. Expose them. Let the world see what humanity becomes when science abandons morality. ALUCARD approached the terminal and began downloading data, his stolen tablet filling with gigabytes of information. As he worked, Marcus spoke again. Tell me, what are you? You're not human, not bioweapon, something older. Something that existed before Umbrella ever dreamed of creating monsters. I'm a vampire, ALUCARD said simply. Born centuries before your corporation, born before science tried to quantify the supernatural. I am what Umbrella has been trying to replicate through crude viral manipulation, a predator that transcends human limitations while retaining purpose and will. He finished the download and turned to face Marcus. The difference between you and me is that I didn't need a laboratory or a virus. I simply am. The facility shook again, harder this time. The tank in the chamber's center cracked, thick preservation fluid gushing across the floor. Marcus began dissolving into dozens of leeches, his human form breaking apart into its component organisms. Perhaps we'll meet again, vampire, the leeches said in chorus, their voice still recognizably Marcus. When Umbrella falls and the world learns what monsters walk among them, until then survive. And remember that evolution takes many forms. Some are born, some are made, and some, the leeches scattered into the facility's ventilation system, are reborn from death itself. Alucard stood alone in the crumbling laboratory, Marcus's final words echoing in the chamber. Above him, the facility began its final collapse, tons of concrete and steel preparing to bury Umbrella's sins forever. He smiled, shadows gathering around his form. Time to leave, but I'll be back, Umbrella Corporation. Your secrets are mine now, and monsters have long memories. He dissolved into mist and shadow, flowing through cracks and vents, racing the facility's destruction to reach the surface. Behind him, the Arclay laboratory imploded, taking decades of illegal research and countless victims to a fiery grave. But the data survived, and with it, the means to destroy Umbrella completely. Alucard emerged from the collapsing Arclay facility like a crimson phoenix from ashes, his form coalescing from shadow, and missed atop a rocky outcropping overlooking Raccoon City. Dawn was attempting to break through the smoke-choked sky, painting everything in sickly orange and gray. The city below was dying its final death. Fires had consumed entire districts, military barricades had been overrun, and the shambling masses of infected had begun turning on each other as fresh prey became scarce. But Alucard's attention was elsewhere. His supernatural senses detected something moving through the chaos with purpose and precision, not fleeing like the handful of survivors, not shambling like the infected, but hunting, following a specific trajectory through the city with the calculated efficiency of a professional. "There you are," Alucard murmured, his crimson eyes tracking the figure kilometers away. Even at this distance, he could sense the viral enhancement, the predatory intelligence, the absolute confidence of someone who had transcended human limitations. "Albert Wesker, let's see if you're worth the reputation your files suggest." He dissolved into shadow and began moving across the city's rooftops, following Wesker's trail. The chase took him through burning commercial districts, across collapsed overpasses, and past scenes of devastation that would haunt survivor nightmares for decades. But Alucard had seen worse: the 30 Years' War, the Turkish invasions, the firebombing of Dresden. Human suffering was a constant across centuries, only the methods changed. Wesker's path led to the Raccoon City Police Department, the Renaissance Revival building that had become a fortress, and then a tomb for dozens of officers. The structure's facade was pockmarked with bullet holes, its windows shattered, and its grand entrance stained with blood. But someone had recently cleared a path through the zombie hordes, bodies neatly arranged in kill zones that spoke of professional marksmanship and tactical awareness. Alucard entered through the main doors, his boots echoing on blood-slicked marble. The interior was a testament to desperate last stands: barricades of furniture, empty ammunition casings scattered like brass snow, and messages scrawled on walls by the doomed. "Help US. No one is coming. God forgive US." God stopped listening to prayers in Raccoon City days ago, Alucard observed, ascending the central staircase. His senses tracked Wesker to the building's western wing, the SDARS office where Umbrella's traitor had once pretended to be a police officer and hero. The office door hung open, and inside Alucard found his quarry. Albert Wesker stood at a computer terminal downloading data with inhuman speed, his fingers blurring across the keyboard. He wore tactical black from neck to boots, a long coat that somehow remained immaculate despite the city's filth, and signature sunglasses that hid his eyes even in the office's dim emergency lighting. Every movement was precise, economical, perfect. the efficiency of someone who had calculated the optimal way to exist. "You've been following me for the past 7 minutes," Wesker said without looking up, his voice cold and clinical. "Maintaining exactly 300 meters distance, moving through shadows, suppressing your physical presence to near invisibility. Impressive stealth for someone who registers as a significant thermal anomaly." He finally turned, and even through the sunglasses, Alucard could sense those inhuman eyes evaluating, calculating, categorizing, but ultimately wasted effort. "My viral enhancements include threat detection far beyond human baseline. I knew you were there before you reached the city limits." Alucard's smile widened, genuine delight coloring his expression. Observant, confident, and not panicking at the presence of an unknown entity, you're already far more interesting than anything else I've encountered in this dying city. He stepped fully into the office, letting shadows peel away to reveal his true form: crimson coat, wide-brimmed hat, and eyes that blazed like fresh blood. "Albert Wesker, former STARS captain, current bioterrorist, and according to your files, a man who successfully merged human intelligence with viral enhancement." Wesker's expression didn't change. No surprise, no fear, just calculating assessment. "You've accessed Umbrella's classified database. That requires either exceptional hacking skills or physical infiltration of secure facilities. Given your," he gestured vaguely, "theatrical aesthetic and thermal signature inconsistencies, I'm inclined to believe the latter, which means you've been through the Nest or Arclay laboratory within the past few hours." He removed his sunglasses with deliberate slowness, revealing eyes that glowed amber gold with slit pupils. "What are you? You're not a behavioral patterns, too much independent cognition. Not human. Your thermal signature is 15 degrees below normal body temperature. Something else entirely." "Vampire," Alucard said with theatrical flourish, executing a mocking bow. "Born in the 15th century, transformed by choice and covenant, servant to the Helsing organization, and currently investigating whether Umbrella Corporation has stumbled onto genuine supernatural principles." He straightened, his gaze locking with Wesker's enhanced eyes. "And you are a science experiment that succeeded where thousands failed. A human who looked at viruses, at plague and death, and saw potential for ascension rather than extinction. How very Nietzschean." "Nietzsche was a madman who died of syphilis," Wesker replied flatly. "I prefer Darwin, evolution through adaptation, survival of the superior specimen, and the inevitable extinction of the weak." He finished his download and pocketed the storage device. "The T-virus outbreak here is simply natural selection operating at maximum efficiency. The weak perish, the strong adapt, and the truly exceptional," he gestured to himself, "transcend. And the 100,000 dead, the children torn apart by their infected parents, the families who died screaming for help that never came." Alucard's tone remained conversational, almost curious. "Where do they fit in your Darwinian paradigm?" "Collateral damage in humanity's evolution." Wesker began moving toward the exit, but Alucard noticed how he positioned himself, always maintaining optimal distance for retreat or attack, never giving his back fully, every muscle coiled for explosive action. "You disapprove? How quaint. A vampire, a creature that feeds on human blood, taking moral offense at scientific progress." "I kill to survive, to feed, to fulfill my nature as a predator," Alucard said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "It's honest, direct. The prey knows they're being hunted, and I don't pretend it's for their benefit, but Umbrella, and by extension. You kills for profit while calling it evolution, deploys bioweapons while claiming it's progress. You've industrialized suffering and wrapped it in philosophical justification. Wesker paused in the doorway, turning slightly. And yet here you are in the middle of Umbrella's greatest failure, downloading their research data, hunting their creations. What does that make you? A hero, a vigilante, or simply another predator securing territory? His smile was thin, calculating. We're not so different, vampire. We both exist beyond human limitation. We both view humanity as something to use for our purposes. The only difference is that I'm honest enough to embrace it without pretending moral superiority. The difference, ALUCARD said, his eyes blazing with genuine fury now, is that I was born a monster and accepted it. You made yourself one and called it ascension. You had a choice, Wesker. Every step of your transformation, every injection of viral serum, every decision to betray your team and serve Umbrella's ambitions, those were choices. You can't blame nature or necessity or evolution. You chose to become this. For the first time, something like emotion flickered across Wesker's face, not anger or guilt, but satisfaction. Precisely. I chose superiority over mediocrity, power over weakness, evolution over stagnation. And I'd make the same choice again because the alternative, remaining human, remaining limited, was intolerable. He turned fully to face ALUCARD now, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. But this philosophical debate is wasting time. The US military will sterilize this city within hours. I need to extract critical data and bioweapon samples before the missiles hit. So I'll ask once, are you here to stop me? No, ALUCARD said, surprising himself slightly with the answer. I'm here to understand what Umbrella created. You're part of that equation, a successful viral enhancement that retained cognition. From a research perspective, you're valuable data. His smile became predatory. But I am curious about one thing. Your files say the prototype virus grants superhuman abilities, enhanced strength, speed, regeneration. Let me test that claim. He moved. One moment, ALUCARD stood 20 feet away. The next, his fist was driving toward Wesker's face with enough force to pulverize a normal human skull. But Wesker wasn't normal anymore. He blurred sideways with impossible speed, the strike missing by millimeters, and countered with a palm strike aimed at ALUCARD's sternum. The impact sent ALUCARD flying backward through 3 cubicle walls, his body creating a crater in the far wall. He felt ribs crack, organs rupture, and spine fracture, injuries that would have killed a human instantly. But his regeneration was already working, tissue knitting back together even as he pulled himself from the wreckage. Impressive, he said, genuinely pleased despite the pain. That actually hurt. You're faster than I anticipated. And you regenerate from catastrophic trauma in seconds, Wesker observed, adjusting his sunglasses despite not actually needing to. The gesture was pure affectation, a reminder that beneath the viral enhancement, he still chose to maintain human habits. Interesting. The prototype virus grants accelerated healing, but nothing approaching that speed. Your vampire physiology is operating on fundamentally different principles. They clashed again, and this time both fighters engaged seriously. Wesker's enhanced speed allowed him to land 3 strikes for every one of ALUCARD's, but each of ALUCARD's blows carried supernatural force that sent Wesker crashing through walls. They destroyed the STARS office within seconds, reducing it to rubble and twisted metal. Wesker demonstrated why he'd been Umbrella's most successful subject. He fought with perfect efficiency, no wasted movement, every strike calculated for maximum damage. His Matrix-style evasion let him dodge attacks that should have been impossible to avoid, and his own strikes hit with pile-driver force that cracked concrete and bent steel. But ALUCARD had 5 centuries of combat experience. He adapted to Wesker's speed within moments, predicting movement patterns, forcing the enhanced human into positions where speed became irrelevant. And unlike Wesker, ALUCARD could take catastrophic damage without slowing down. Bullets, blades, blunt force trauma, all of it meaningless against regeneration that bordered on true immortality.
Wesker drove his hand through Alucard's chest, fingers spearing through ribs to grip his heart. "Checkmate," he said coldly, preparing to crush the organ. Alucard smiled, blood running from his mouth. "You're thinking too much like a human." Shadows erupted from his body, tentacles of living darkness that wrapped around Wesker and slammed him through the floor into the level below. Alucard's chest wound sealed instantly, and he dropped through the hole after his opponent. They crashed into the RPD's evidence storage, surrounded by decades of confiscated weapons and criminal paraphernalia. Wesker rolled to his feet, and for the first time, Alucard saw something approaching respect in those inhuman eyes. "You're not using your full power," Wesker observed, brushing dust from his coat. "Neither am I, admittedly. We're both testing limits, gathering data. How very scientific of us." "I could release my restrictions and end this fight instantly," Alucard admitted. "But where's the entertainment in that? It's been so long since I faced someone who could actually hurt me. I want to savor this." He drew his casual, the massive pistol gleaming in the emergency lighting. "Besides, I have questions. Why are you collecting Umbrella's data if you've gone rogue? What's your endgame, Wesker?" Wesker's smile was cold and calculating. "Umbrella is dying. Raccoon City's destruction will draw too much attention, trigger too many investigations. The corporation will collapse within months. But their research," he patted the storage device in his pocket, "that's valuable. Bioweapons data, viral enhancement protocols, decades of human experimentation results. Organizations and governments will pay fortunes for this information. And with those resources, I'll build something superior to Umbrella's short-sighted corporate structure." "You want to create your own bioweapons empire," Alucard said. "How ambitious. And where do enhanced humans like yourself fit into this new world order?" "At the top, naturally. The prototype virus was merely the first step. With access to G-Virus, T-Veronica, and other advanced strains, I can perfect viral enhancement. Create a new breed of humanity that has transcended biological limitation." Wesker's eyes blazed brighter. "Evolution isn't about adaptation to environment. It's about transcending the need for adaptation. Becoming the ultimate apex predator that environment must adapt to." "Spoken like someone who's never been prey," Alucard said softly, and suddenly his presence expanded, filling the room with oppressive supernatural weight. The temperature plummeted, frost forming on surfaces, and Wesker felt something he hadn't experienced since his transformation: primal fear. "You think viral enhancement makes you an apex predator. You've seen nothing, faced nothing. You're a laboratory creation pretending to be a god. Let me show you what a real predator looks like." Shadow erupted from Alucard's form, not the controlled tendrils he'd used before, but a tidal wave of darkness that consumed half the evidence room. From that darkness, eyes opened by the dozens, each one glowing crimson with ancient malevolence. The shadows took shape, forming hellhounds with too many teeth, ravens with razor wings, and humanoid figures that screamed with the voices of everyone Alucard had ever consumed. Wesker's enhanced reflexes kicked in, and he moved with superhuman speed toward the exit. But the shadows were faster. They cut off every escape route, surrounded him completely, and for the first time since his transformation, Albert Wesker found himself trapped. "This is what you're trying to replicate with your viruses," Alucard's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. "True supernatural power, not enhancement through biological manipulation, but transformation that rewrites existence itself. You can heal quickly. I regenerate from disintegration. You can move faster than human eyes track. I can become immaterial. You've optimized human potential. I've transcended humanity entirely." The shadows pressed in, and Wesker felt pressure building on his enhanced body. His prototype virus screamed danger signals, flooding his system with adrenaline and combat stimulants, but even his enhanced physiology had limits. If Alucard decided to crush him within this darkness, even his regeneration might not save him. Then the shadows withdrew as suddenly as they'd appeared, and Alucard stood before him in human form again, smile pleasant and terrifying. "But I'm not going to kill you today, Albert Wesker. You're more valuable alive. You represent Umbrella's greatest success, proof that viral enhancement can work. And when Umbrella falls, when their crimes are exposed, you'll be the evidence that makes it impossible to deny what they created." Wesker straightened slowly, his body already healing from the supernatural pressure. But his expression had changed, the cold calculation replaced by something approaching fascination. "You could have killed me, should have, by any tactical assessment. Yet you chose not to. Why? Arrogance, curiosity, some vampire code of honor." "All three," Alucard admitted. "But primarily because you're right about one thing: we are alike. Both predators existing beyond normal limits, both monsters by choice or nature. And I respect that, even if I find your methods distasteful." He holstered his casual. "Besides, the world needs villains like you. It helps heroes know what they're fighting for. And I do enjoy watching humans struggle against overwhelming odds." "Pragmatic nihilism dressed as philosophy," Wesker observed. "At least you're honest about it." He moved toward the exit, pausing at the threshold. "This isn't over, vampire. Our paths will cross again, and next time I'll be prepared for your theatrical displays." "I'm counting on it." Alucard's smile widened. "After all, you're the most interesting thing I've found in this entire apocalypse. It would be disappointing if you died to something as mundane as nuclear sterilization." Wesker vanished in a blur of superhuman speed, his form blurring through corridors and out of the building in seconds. Alucard let him go, knowing that whatever Wesker built from Umbrella's ashes would eventually require attention. But for now, he had his own mission to complete. He ascended to the RPD's roof and surveyed Raccoon City one final time. Military helicopters circled the perimeter, and in the distance, he could sense strategic bombers moving into position. The sterilization was imminent, missiles carrying payloads designed to incinerate everything within the city limits, leaving nothing but ash and radiation. "Time to leave this charnel house," Alucard murmured, pulling out the tablet containing Umbrella's stolen data. Gigabytes of criminal evidence, decades of illegal experimentation, and proof of governmental complicity in bioweapons development. Integra will find this very interesting, and the organizations hunting Umbrella will finally have the ammunition they need. He dissolved into mist and shadow, flowing away from the doomed city like smoke on the wind. Behind him, air raid sirens began wailing, a final warning for any survivors still clinging to life in Raccoon City's ruins. As he left, he noticed a figure on a distant rooftop, Leon Kennedy, the rookie cop he'd saved, standing beside what appeared to be a young woman in civilian clothes and a little girl. They'd found an extraction helicopter. They'd survived. "Live well, Officer Kennedy," Alucard thought, too distant for the human to hear. "Bear witness to what happened here, and remember that monsters come in many forms. Some wear lab coats, some wear badges, and some wear faces like your friends and neighbors. The true horror isn't that Umbrella created bioweapons. It's that humans allowed it to happen." The missiles hit. Raccoon City disappeared in a series of explosions that turned night into day, fire blooming like crimson flowers across the urban landscape. The shockwave rippled outward, flattening everything that remained standing. Within minutes, 100,000 Souls' final resting place became a crater of molten glass and ash. Alucard watched from kilometers away, perched on a mountain overlooking the devastation. The fires reflected in his crimson eyes, and for a moment, just a moment, something like sadness crossed his ancient features. "Humans," he whispered to the burning horizon, "always so good at destroying yourselves. You don't need monsters like me. You create far worse horrors on your own." He turned away from the apocalypse and began the journey back to London, to Integra, to the Helsing organization. But he knew this wasn't over. Umbrella's reach extended globally. Wesker was building something from their ashes, and somewhere in the darkness, creatures like James Marcus plotted their revenge. The hunt was just beginning.
3 weeks after Raccoon City's sterilization, ALUCARD stood in the Helsing Manor's war room, watching Integra review the data he'd extracted from Umbrella's facilities. The room was thick with cigar smoke and tension as she scrolled through document after document: human experimentation logs, financial records linking Umbrella to multiple governments, and bioweapon deployment schedules that painted a picture of an organization far more dangerous than anyone had suspected. "This is unconscionable," Integra said finally, her voice tight with controlled fury. She stabbed out her cigar with more force than necessary. Umbrella wasn't just conducting illegal weapons research. They were systematically using civilian populations as test subjects, entire African villages exposed to progenitor virus strains, Arklay Mountains locals infected deliberately to study transmission vectors. In Raccoon City, she pulled up casualty estimates: 100,000 dead, and the US government helped them cover it up. Not helped, ALUCARD corrected from his position in the shadows. Financed. According to those financial records, the US military paid Umbrella billions for bioweapons development under the guise of pharmaceutical contracts. When Raccoon City's outbreak threatened to expose the arrangement, they chose to bury the evidence, literally. His crimson eyes gleamed in the candlelight. "Though I suspect many officials convinced themselves it was necessary. National security, the greater good. The usual justifications humans use when committing atrocities." Integra pulled up a different file: security footage from the Spencer Mansion incident that had preceded Raccoon City's fall. It showed STAR's team members being systematically hunted by bioweapons while their captain, Albert Wesker, watched from concealed positions, collecting combat data. "This Wesker, you encountered him." "Briefly and memorably." ALUCARD's smile suggested the memory was pleasant. He successfully integrated viral enhancement while retaining full cognitive function, superhuman speed, strength, regeneration, and most importantly, ambition. He's collecting Umbrella's research to build his own organization, a more competent, more dangerous successor. Then he needs to be eliminated. Eventually, but not yet. ALUCARD moved to the window, gazing out at London's nighttime skyline. Wesker is a predator operating in the open now. He'll make mistakes, create patterns, draw attention. Let him build his empire. The higher he rises, the harder he'll fall. And more importantly, he turned back to Integra, he'll draw out other organizations interested in bioweapons, groups we don't know about yet. Let Wesker be the lure. Integra considered this, then nodded slowly. "Very well, but we need to ensure Umbrella itself falls. This data is damning, but it needs to reach the right people, investigators who can't be bought or intimidated." She began drafting a list. The BSAA is a start. Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine, the SDARS survivors, have been trying to expose Umbrella for months. TerraSave, the anti-bioterrorism NGO, and certain journalists with protection from independent organizations. "You're declaring war on a multinational corporation with government backing," ALUCARD observed. "Umbrella won't accept destruction quietly. They'll fight back with lawyers, assassins, and whatever bioweapons they have left in reserve. This will get very ugly." "Good." Integra's smile was cold and sharp. "I want it ugly. I want Umbrella's executives terrified. I want them to understand that there are consequences for treating human life as experimental data." She stood, moving to a secure communications terminal. "Contact our agents in North America, Europe, and Asia. Begin distributing this data through encrypted channels. Make sure it reaches law enforcement, media outlets, and rival pharmaceutical companies. Umbrella's competitors will smell blood in the water and attack. Playing corporate politics, ALUCARD said with amusement. How very modern of you, Integra. Your grandfather would have simply sent me to kill everyone involved and called it divine justice. My grandfather was a fanatic who nearly destroyed the organization, Integra replied sharply. I prefer surgical precision over blunt force. Though, she glanced at him meaningfully, there may come a time when your particular skills are needed. Umbrella's executive board includes individuals who have been directly involved in bioweapons deployment. They have blood on their hands. Then I'll be happy to spill more when the time comes. ALUCARD began dissolving into shadow, preparing to return to his quarters. But for now, let the humans destroy each other through courts and media exposure. I'll intervene when something supernatural emerges, and it will. Umbrella was dabbling in occult research alongside their virology. They created creatures like James Marcus, who exist on the boundary between science and supernatural. There will be more. After he'd vanished, Integra sat alone in the war room, surrounded by evidence of humanity's capacity for evil. She'd spent her life fighting supernatural threats, vampires, ghouls, demonic entities. But Umbrella proved that humans could create horrors equal to anything supernatural through nothing more than ambition and sociopathy. Sometimes, she murmured to the empty room, I wonder if we're protecting the right species. 6 months later, the Global Pharmaceutical Consortium's annual summit took place in Geneva, Switzerland, a gathering of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies, regulatory officials, and investors. The event was normally a celebration of medical advancement and profitable quarterly returns. This year, it became Umbrella Corporation's execution. ALUCARD observed from the balcony of a luxury hotel across from the convention center, watching limousines arrive and disgorge executives in expensive suits. Through high-powered binoculars, he identified several targets: Umbrella's current CEO following Oswell Spencer's mysterious disappearance, board members who'd approved bioweapons projects, and government officials who'd enabled the corporation through willful ignorance. Inside the convention center, investigative journalists had been given anonymous access to Umbrella's complete research database. Within hours, headlines would scream across every news network: pharmaceutical giant behind Raccoon City massacre. Umbrella Corp used civils as test subjects. BIOWEAPONS conspiracy, INVOLVES multiple governments. The Helsing organization's strategy was elegant in its brutality. Let Umbrella's own documentation destroy them. No vampire attacks, no supernatural intervention, just cold hard evidence distributed to everyone who could act on it. ALUCARD's phone buzzed. Integra's voice came through clearly. The files are being released now. Major news networks in 17 countries are simultaneously broadcasting the story. Umbrella's stock has already dropped 40% and trading has been halted. Multiple governments are announcing investigations. And the executives? ALUCARD asked, watching the convention center through his binoculars. Some are attempting to flee. Others are trying to spin this as industrial espionage or corporate sabotage. None of them realize how thoroughly they've been compromised. Integra's satisfaction was audible. The BSAA has coordinated with Interpol to issue arrest warrants for the entire board of directors. They won't make it out of Geneva. Not all of them, ALUCARD corrected, focusing on a side entrance where a figure in black was exiting discreetly, Albert Wesker, wearing different sunglasses but still unmistakable. Wesker's here. He's been inside, probably collecting final data or securing bioweapon samples before everything collapses. Shall I intercept? A pause while Integra considered. No, let him run. As you said, he'll be useful as bait for other organizations, but make sure he knows we're watching. ALUCARD smiled and stepped off the balcony. He fell 15 stories, his coat billowing around him, and landed silently in the alley below. Wesker was 3 blocks away, moving through Geneva's streets with superhuman speed, not fast enough to draw attention, but fast enough to cover ground quickly. ALUCARD matched his pace effortlessly, staying just within Wesker's enhanced perception range. He wanted the viral-enhanced human to know he was being followed. After 5 blocks, Wesker abruptly stopped in a deserted plaza, turning to face his pursuer. "The vampire," Wesker said flatly. "I wondered when you'd appear, come to gloat over Umbrella's destruction." "Hardly. I find corporate collapse tedious." ALUCARD emerged from the shadows, his presence making the plaza's temperature drop noticeably. "I'm here to deliver a message. We're watching. Wherever you go, whatever you build from Umbrella's ashes, the Helsing organization will be observing. Step too far out of line, threaten too many innocents, and I'll come for you. Not to arrest or contain, to destroy." Wesker's lips quirked in something approaching a smile. A threat, how refreshingly direct. Most organizations prefer diplomatic language and legal posturing. You simply promise violence. He adjusted his sunglasses, that habitual gesture that ALUCARD now recognized as affectation rather than necessity. "But you've made a mistake, vampire. By not killing me in Raccoon City, you've allowed me time to study you, to analyze your abilities, to develop countermeasures." "Have you now?" ALUCARD's interest was genuine. "Do share. I'm fascinated by how humans think they can counter the supernatural through science." "Everything can be quantified, measured, and replicated," Wesker replied. "Your regeneration operates on principles similar to advanced viral healing factors. Your shadow manipulation suggests some form of matter-state transition using an unknown energy source. Your supernatural strength likely comes from enhanced cellular efficiency beyond even my prototype virus capabilities." He began walking in a slow circle around ALUCARD. "Given sufficient time and resources, I could recreate your abilities through purely biological means. Transform humans into vampires without the traditional infection vector. Controlled, optimized, perfected." "You're talking about what Umbrella already attempted," ALUCARD said. "The progenitor virus research, the alchemical symbols in the Arclay laboratory. They knew they were chasing vampirism. They failed because some things can't be replicated in laboratories." "They failed because they lacked vision," Wesker corrected. "They treated viral enhancement as weaponry instead of evolution. They created soldiers and bioweapons when they should have been creating gods." His eyes blazed brighter behind the sunglasses. "But I won't make their mistakes. I understand now that true evolution requires more than physical enhancement. It requires transcending the limitations of biology, morality, and humanity itself." "Ah," ALUCARD said softly, dangerously. "You want to become what I am. Not just enhanced human, but true monster. How very ambitious and very foolish." "Why foolish?" Wesker challenged. "You achieved it. You transcended human limitation and gained immortality, power, superiority over normal humans. Why shouldn't I aspire to the same?" "Because I paid for it with my soul." The words came out flat, emotionless, but somehow they carried more weight than any theatrical declaration. "I died and was reborn as something fundamentally different. not an upgrade or enhancement, a complete transformation that cost me everything I was. You're trying to get vampire powers through a discount viral injection. It doesn't work that way. For a long moment, they stared at each other, ancient vampire and modern bioterrorist, supernatural monster and scientific abomination. Then Wesker turned away, dismissing the conversation. We'll see. The 21st century belongs to those who embrace evolution rather than cling to outdated limitations. Whether through virology or vampirism, I will transcend. And when I do, he glanced back over his shoulder, perhaps we'll have a rematch, under more controlled conditions. He blurred away at superhuman speed, disappearing into Geneva's nighttime crowds. ALUCARD let him go, knowing that Wesker's ambition would eventually lead him back into Helsing's crosshairs. But for now, the more pressing concern was Umbrella's dissolution. 2 months later, the trials began in The Hague, Netherlands, where the International Criminal Court had assumed jurisdiction over Umbrella's crimes against humanity. Executives were paraded before judges, their carefully maintained corporate personas crumbling under the weight of evidence. Testimony from survivors, including Leon Kennedy, now a U.S. government agent, and Claire Redfield, working with TerraSave, painted damning pictures of Umbrella's callous disregard for human life. ALUCARD attended the trials invisibly, his form cloaked in shadows, observing humanity's attempt at justice. The proceedings were theatrical in their own way, prosecutors displaying photos of dead children, playing recorded screams from Umbrella's test facilities, and presenting financial records showing that executives had knowingly profited from mass murder. Many broke under the pressure, confessing crimes in exchange for reduced sentences. Others maintained defiant silence, believing their wealth and connections would eventually secure release. A few attempted suicide rather than face justice. This is humanity's greatest strength and weakness, ALUCARD thought, watching a former Umbrella researcher weep on the witness stand while describing experiments on orphan children. You create unimaginable horrors, then feel genuine remorse afterward. You're capable of both casual evil and desperate redemption, sometimes within the same individual. Outside the courthouse, protesters gathered, victims' families demanding death penalties, anti-corporate activists calling for pharmaceutical industry reform, and conspiracy theorists claiming the trials were theater while the real perpetrators remained free. In a sense, they were right. Oswald Spencer, Umbrella's founder and true architect of the bioweapons program, had vanished months before Raccoon City's destruction. Wesker was building a new organization in the shadows. And countless government officials who'd enabled Umbrella would never face consequences. But the trials accomplished something important. They publicly acknowledged that corporate evil existed, that profit motive could drive atrocity, and that even powerful organizations could be held accountable. It was imperfect justice, but it was justice nonetheless. The sentences came down over several months. Life imprisonment for executives directly involved in bioweapons deployment. 20 to 40 years for researchers who'd conducted human experimentation. Fines and asset seizures that destroyed Umbrella's remaining financial infrastructure. The corporation itself was dissolved, its patents seized, its facilities destroyed, and its name made synonymous with evil. Integra watched the final verdict from her office in London, ALUCARD standing beside her in the shadows. "It's done," she said quietly. "Umbrella Corporation no longer exists." "The corporation is gone," ALUCARD agreed. "But its legacy remains. Wesker has their research. Other organizations have acquired bioweapon samples from black market sales. Governments still maintain classified bioweapons programs despite international treaties. We've cut off one head, but the Hydra has many more. Then we'll cut them off too, one at a time, for as long as it takes. Integra turned to face him, her expression hard and determined. The Helsing organization was founded to protect England from supernatural threats, but Umbrella proved that human evil can rival anything supernatural. We need to adapt. You want to expand the mission, ALUCARD said. Hunt not just vampires and ghouls, but bioterrorists and corporate criminals. A dangerous precedent, Master. Once you start policing human evil, where does it end? How many monsters do you plan to fight before you become one yourself? Integra's smile was sharp. I have you to remind me where that line is. You're a monster by nature and choice. I'm a human choosing to fight monsters. As long as I remember the difference, I think we'll be fine. Optimistic, Alucard observed. But I suppose someone needs to be. He moved toward the window, preparing to dissolve into shadow. For what it's worth, Master, you handled Umbrella's destruction well. Surgically precise, morally justified, and you let human justice take precedence over supernatural intervention. Arthur would be proud, even if he'd never admit it. My father died believing the world was divided between humans and monsters, Integra said quietly. Umbrella taught me that the division isn't that simple. Sometimes the monsters wear human faces and carry briefcases. Sometimes the heroes are literal vampires dispensing brutal justice. The world is more complicated than Helsing doctrine admits. Always has been, Alucard agreed. Humans just prefer simple narratives, good versus evil, human versus monster, natural versus supernatural. But reality is messy, contradictory, and deeply uncomfortable. Welcome to enlightenment, Master. Try not to let it drive you mad. He vanished into shadow, leaving Integra alone with her thoughts, and the knowledge that Umbrella's destruction was just the beginning of a longer, more complicated war. 6 months after the trials, reports began filtering in through various intelligence channels, sightings of enhanced humans demonstrating superhuman abilities, black market sales of viral samples to terrorist organizations, and mysterious deaths among scientists who'd worked on bioweapons projects. Wesker's new organization, operating under the name the Third Organization, or sometimes simply New Umbrella, was making moves. But something else was happening too. Survivors of Raccoon City were coming forward with stories that official investigations had dismissed, tales of a figure in red who'd fought bioweapons single-handedly, who'd saved civilians from certain death, who'd moved through the infected city like death incarnate. The descriptions were vague, often conflicting, but consistent enough to draw attention. Urban legends began circulating online. The Crimson Reaper of Raccoon City, the red-coated demon who hunts monsters, Umbrella's nemesis. Some claimed he was a government super soldier. Others insisted he was a bioweapon that had turned against its creators. A few, very few, whispered about vampires and supernatural intervention. Alucard found the legends amusing. Humanity's need to rationalize the inexplicable through mythology and folklore was a constant across centuries. In medieval times, he'd been the impaling prince, the son of the devil. In Victorian England, he'd been Dracula, the foreign threat. Now, in the 21st century, he was an urban legend on internet forums, discussed alongside Bigfoot and alien abductions. Let them speculate, he told Integra when she expressed concern about exposure. Humans are very good at denying what they don't want to believe. Show them a vampire, and they'll rationalize it as prosthetics, camera tricks, or mental illness. The supernatural survives by hiding in plain sight, dismissed as fiction even when it walks among them. And he was right. Despite survivor testimony, despite grainy security footage, despite forensic evidence that couldn't be explained through conventional means, the official narrative remained. Raccoon City had been destroyed by bioweapons, and any stories of supernatural intervention were trauma-induced hallucinations or attention-seeking fabrication. The truth was classified, compartmentalized, and buried beneath layers of government secrecy. The Helsing organization ensured it stayed that way, using their considerable influence to suppress evidence and discredit witnesses. It was easier than ALUCARD expected. Humans desperately wanted to believe the world operated on rational, understandable principles. Vampires didn't fit that worldview, so they simply rejected the evidence. But one person knew the truth. Leon Kennedy, now a special agent for the U.S. government's Anti-Bioterrorism Division, occasionally received anonymous intelligence about bioweapon operations, locations of hidden laboratories, names of rogue scientists, and warnings about upcoming attacks. The information was always accurate, always actionable, and always arrived through untraceable channels. Leon suspected the source. He'd seen what the man in red could do, heard that accent, looked into those ancient crimson eyes. But he never spoke about it in official reports, never mentioned the vampire who'd saved his life in Raccoon City. Some truths were too dangerous to share, and some debts could never be repaid. On quiet nights, when cases went wrong and good people died despite his best efforts, Leon would stand on his apartment balcony and look out at the darkness. And sometimes, just sometimes, he'd see a crimson coat disappearing into shadows, and he'd know that whatever horrors humanity created, there were older monsters watching from the darkness, maintaining a balance humans didn't understand. It wasn't comforting exactly, but it was something. Present day, 1 year after Raccoon City. ALUCARD stood once more in the Helsing war room, reviewing new intelligence. Umbrella's remnants had scattered across the globe, but bioterrorism was increasing. Wesker's organization was growing stronger, and somewhere in the darkness, creatures like James Marcus plotted revenge against the world that had created them. It never ends, Integra observed, studying a map dotted with bioweapon incident markers. We destroyed Umbrella, but we didn't destroy the idea of bioweapons. We didn't stop humanity's drive to create monsters through science. You can't stop it, ALUCARD said. Humans will always seek power, always try to transcend limitations, always create horrors in pursuit of advancement. It's your nature. The only question is whether someone's watching to prevent those horrors from consuming everything. He smiled, ancient and terrible and somehow reassuring. That's where we come in. The monsters who hunt monsters, the predators who keep other predators in check. Poetic, Integra said dryly, but accurate, which brings me to our next assignment. She pulled up a file marked with the highest classification, a report from Spain about a rural village where American agents had encountered something called Las Plagas, a parasitic organism that controlled human hosts while retaining their intelligence. This isn't viral. It's something older, possibly medieval in origin, and it's being weaponized by a cult with ties to Umbrella's European operations. ALUCARD's grin widened with genuine delight. Parasites that preserve consciousness while subverting will. How very interesting. Much more creative than mere zombie viruses. He took the file, scanning the details. When do I leave? Tomorrow night. And ALUCARD. Integra's expression was serious. This is reconnaissance only. Don't start a war with an entire cult because you're bored. I make no promises, ALUCARD said, already dissolving into shadow. His laughter echoed through the war room long after his form had vanished. After all, Master, what's the point of being an immortal vampire if you can't occasionally start wars for entertainment? Integra sighed, lighting another cigar. Sometimes I wonder if we're really the good guys in this scenario. From the shadows, Alucard's voice drifted back. Good guys, bad guys. In the end, we're all just monsters trying to justify our existence. The difference is that some of us are honest about it. And with that philosophical gem, he was gone, leaving Integra alone with her doubts and the knowledge that tomorrow would bring new horrors, new challenges, and new questions about where the line between hero and monster truly lay. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, Umbrella Corporation was destroyed, its executives imprisoned, and its bioweapons contained. It was imperfect victory, but victory nonetheless. And in the world of monsters, both human and supernatural, imperfect victories were the best anyone could hope for. The village of Dobruja existed on no official maps, tucked into the Carpathian Mountains like a forgotten relic of medieval Europe. Its population numbered less than 300 souls, mostly elderly farmers and their families who still lived without electricity, growing crops by hand and raising livestock in ways unchanged for centuries. It was the kind of place modernity had forgotten, until Umbrella Corporation's European subsidiary discovered it. Alucard approached the village on foot through heavy snow, his crimson coat a splash of color against the monochrome winter landscape. The intelligence from Helsing's network had been disturbingly vague, an entire village infected with something called the mold, a fungal organism that seemed to blend characteristics of the T-virus with something far older and more insidious. Local authorities had quarantined the area, but whispers spoke of villagers who'd become something other than human, not zombies, but conscious hosts to an alien intelligence. Fungi, Alucard mused as he walked, his breath not fogging despite the sub-zero temperature. Humanity's oldest evolutionary competitors. You existed before mammals, before dinosaurs, before complex life crawled from the oceans. And now someone's weaponized you. How very appropriate. The village came into view through the snow, wooden houses with thatched roofs, a small Orthodox church with peeling paint, and absolutely no signs of life. No smoke from chimneys, no livestock sounds, no movement at all. Just oppressive silence broken only by wind through bare trees. Alucard's supernatural senses detected them immediately. Not dead, but transformed. The villagers were still present, their life signs altered but persistent. They watched him from windows, from behind buildings, from the church bell tower, waiting, assessing. The intelligence behind those hidden eyes felt different from bioweapons or zombies, older, more patient, fundamentally alien. He stopped in the village square beside a frozen well and called out, "I know you're watching. I can feel you in every shadow, every darkened window. Come out and introduce yourselves properly. It's rude to spy on guests." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the church doors opened, and a figure emerged, an elderly woman in traditional dress, her face deeply lined with age. She walked with the careful steps of someone navigating ice, completely human in appearance except for her eyes. Where there should have been whites and irises, black mold grew in fractal patterns, pulsing gently with bioluminescent amber light. "Vampire," she said in archaic Romanian, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested multiple speakers. "We know what you are. The village remembers your kind. Our grandmother's grandmothers spoke of the impaling prince who became something worse than death. She smiled, revealing teeth stained black by fungal growth. You are Dracula's son, the Dampier who rejected humanity. Welcome home, ALUCARD. His eyebrows rose fractionally. You know my name. Impressive. Most bioweapons barely achieve language, let alone historical knowledge. What are you? You're not simple viral infection or parasitic control. You're something that thinks, remembers, understands. We are the mold, the woman said, spreading her arms wide. The gesture revealed root-like tendrils growing beneath her skin, visible through translucent flesh. We have existed in these mountains since before humans built their first fires. We grow in darkness, in dampness, in the forgotten places between life and death. Umbrella Corporation found us, studied us, tried to weaponize us. Her smile widened grotesquely. They failed to understand that we were never mindless. We simply waited. And when they brought us hosts, we finally had voices to speak with. More villagers emerged from buildings. Men, women, even children, all bearing the same molded eyes and fungal growth beneath their skin. They moved with eerie synchronization, not the jerky shambling of zombies, but the fluid coordination of a hive mind operating multiple bodies. A collective intelligence, ALUCARD observed, genuinely fascinated. Distributed consciousness across multiple hosts. Each body is a node in a larger network. Clever, much more efficient than Umbrella's top-down control systems. He began walking around the gathered villagers, studying them like specimens. But what do you want? You've consumed this village. Why not spread? Why wait here in isolation? Because we learned, the old woman said, tracking him with those alien eyes. Umbrella tried to force us to spread rapidly, to infect aggressively, to become a weapon. But we are not weapon, we are symbiont. We offer our hosts gifts, perfect health, extended lifespan, shared consciousness that eliminates loneliness. In exchange, we ask only to exist, to grow slowly, to integrate carefully into human society. A Faustian bargain, ALUCARD said. Trade your individual identity for collective immortality. Become part of something larger than yourself, losing what makes you human in the process. He stopped before a young girl, perhaps 8 years old, her face sweet and innocent except for the black mold growing in her eyes. Tell me, child, do you remember who you were before the mold? Do you remember your mother's voice, your favorite toy, your dreams of who you'd become? The girl smiled, and when she spoke, it was with the old woman's voice, the same harmonics suggesting multiple speakers. I remember everything. We all do. The mold doesn't erase memory, it preserves it, shares it. This child's joy at summer festivals, her fear of wolves in winter, her love for her grandmother, all of it lives within our collective consciousness. She is not lost. She is amplified. How very philosophical, ALUCARD said softly, dangerously. But I notice you didn't answer my question about spreading. You claim you want peaceful symbiosis, but you're infectious. One spore in the wrong place and you could consume cities, continents. Why should I believe you'll stay contained? The villagers spoke in unison now, dozens of voices creating an otherworldly chorus. Because we have seen what happened to Raccoon City. We felt umbrellas fall through the research network. We know that humanity hunts bioweapons now, burns infected cities, shows no mercy to things that threaten civilization. We are old, vampire. We have survived for millennia by being patient, by hiding, by never drawing enough attention to trigger extinction responses. The chorus paused, then continued more quietly. We do not wish to die, so we will remain here in our forgotten village, living in balance with our hosts, unless forced otherwise. And if I report your existence to authorities, ALUCARD challenged, If I tell the BSAA or Helsing that an intelligent fungal colony has achieved consciousness and consumed a village, they'll sterilize this entire mountain range. Then we will die, the old woman said simply. But before we do, we will release our spores on the wind. Every village within 100 kilometers will be infected within days. Every city within 1,000 kilometers within months. We do not want this. We prefer peaceful coexistence, but we will not go extinct without resistance. Mutually assured destruction. The mold had learned not just from Umbrella's research, but from human history, specifically from Cold War nuclear deterrence theory. They were offering a deal. Leave us alone and we'll remain isolated. Threaten us and we'll take half of Eastern Europe with us. ALUCARD laughed, a genuine sound of delighted surprise. Well played. You've successfully achieved what most bioweapons never manage, negotiation leverage. You're not mindless plague or rampaging monster. You're an intelligent species protecting its survival. He walked back to the village center, considering options. But you've presented me with a moral dilemma. I'm here to hunt monsters and protect humanity. You are both monster and human simultaneously. How do I categorize you? We are not enemies, the chorus said. We are what humanity might become if it embraces symbiosis instead of domination. We are post-human, transhuman, the next step in evolution. I've heard that sales pitch before, ALUCARD replied dryly. Albert Wesker uses similar language to justify his viral enhancement programs. Next step in evolution usually translates to justification for atrocity. He stopped walking, facing the gathered villagers directly. Here's my counterproposal. I will not report your existence to human authorities, yet, but Helsing will monitor this village. Any sign of spread, any infection beyond your current population, and I will return to burn every spore and every host to ash. You claim you want peaceful coexistence. Prove it. Remain contained. Remain hidden. And perhaps we can revisit this arrangement in a decade or two. The villagers conferred silently, their hive mind processing the proposal through quantum-fast neural networking. Finally, the old woman nodded. Acceptable. We will remain here in Dobrija until such time as humanity is ready to accept our existence. We are patient. We can wait centuries if necessary. After all, she smiled with genuine warmth despite the alien horror of her molded features. We learned patience from you, Ancient One. Vampires have coexisted with humanity for millennia by hiding in plain sight. We will do the same. One more condition, ALUCARD said. The children, the ones infected who never chose this. If I can find a way to reverse the mold's integration, to restore their individual consciousness, you will cooperate. The silence that followed was weighted tense. Then, if such reversal is possible without killing the hosts, we will consider it. But understand, many hosts do not wish to return to isolation. Loneliness is a human plague we have cured. Some prefer our collective embrace. Understood, but the choice should be theirs, not yours. ALUCARD turned to leave, then paused. I'm curious about something. You said you remembered me, or rather, remembered stories about me. What exactly do the old tales say? The old woman's expression became contemplative, almost nostalgic. They say Vlad Tepes was a prince who became a monster to fight monsters, that he impaled 20,000 invaders to protect his people, that he died and rose again as something neither living nor dead, cursed to walk eternity drinking blood. They say he was both hero and devil, defender and destroyer, human and inhuman. She met his crimson eyes with her molded ones. They say he understood that sometimes, to protect what is precious, you must become what is feared. We understand that paradox now. We became monsters to survive. just like you." Alucard stood silent for a long moment, snow falling around him like frozen tears. "The difference," he said finally, "is that I chose monstrosity. Your hosts were given no choice. Remember that distinction. It matters." He dissolved into shadow and mist, flowing away from the village like smoke on the wind. Behind him, the villagers of Dobruja returned to their homes, to their ancient rhythms, to their strange new existence as nodes in a fungal consciousness that had learned to think, to negotiate, to survive. As he traveled back toward civilization, Alucard contacted Integra through encrypted channels. "Mission complete. The mold is contained, conscious, and surprisingly rational. I've negotiated temporary ceasefire with conditions. Recommend long-term monitoring rather than destruction." "You negotiated with a bioweapon." Integra's voice held disbelief and grudging respect. "That's unprecedented." "It's not a bioweapon," Alucard corrected. "It's a species, an alien intelligence that existed here long before humans arrived. Umbrella simply provided it with better hosts. There's a difference between killing mindless plague and committing genocide against sentient beings." "That's a very fine moral line you're drawing." "I've had 500 years to practice moral philosophy," Alucard replied. "Besides, they reminded me of something important. Not all monsters are villains and not all humans are heroes. The world is complicated. We should acknowledge that instead of pretending everything fits into neat categories." Integra was silent for a moment then. "Very well, we'll monitor the situation. But Alucard, if they break containment, if even one spore escapes that village—" "I'll burn it all down myself," he promised. "But I don't think they will. They're genuinely afraid of extinction, and fear is excellent motivation for good behavior." London 2 months later. The debriefing on the Dobruja situation led to heated discussions within Helsing's leadership. Walter, the organization's butler and former operative, argued for immediate sterilization. "Intelligent or not, it's a biological hazard. One mistake, one mutation, and it spreads beyond control. Better to eliminate the threat now." Integra disagreed. "If we destroy every non-human intelligence we encounter, we're no better than the organizations we fight. The mold has demonstrated restraint, negotiation capability, and self-preservation instinct. Those are traits we can work with." "You're setting dangerous precedent," Walter warned. "Today it's sentient fungi. Tomorrow it's vampires arguing they deserve legal rights. Where does it end?" "It ends when we stop treating everything inhuman as automatically monstrous," Integra replied sharply. "Alucard is inhuman. Should we destroy him for the good of humanity?" Walter glanced at Alucard, who lounged in the corner shadows with his usual theatricality. "Alucard serves Helsing by choice and contract. The mold serves only itself." "For now," Alucard interjected. "But given time and proper incentive, perhaps it could serve humanity's interests as well. Imagine medical applications, perfect immune systems, regeneration, distributed processing for solving complex problems. The mold could be humanity's greatest ally if approached correctly." "Or its extinction," Walter countered. "Both can be true," Alucard said with a smile. "That's what makes it interesting." The debate continued for hours, eventually resulting in a compromise. The Dobruja situation would be monitored quarterly, with Alucard making regular visits to ensure containment. If the mold showed any signs of aggressive expansion, sterilization protocols would activate immediately. It was, as Integra observed, mutually assured destruction, with extremely paranoid verification. But underneath the debates and protocols, something more significant had shifted. For the first time, Helsing Organization, an institution founded on killing supernatural threats, had acknowledged that not all inhuman entities required destruction. Some required understanding, negotiation, and careful coexistence. It was a small evolution in thinking, but in an organization centuries old, small evolutions mattered. Leon Kennedy sat in a nondescript office in Washington, D.C., reviewing reports on global bioterrorism incidents. The numbers were staggering. Despite Umbrella's destruction, bioweapon attacks had increased by 40%. Wesker's organization, New Umbrella, had sold viral samples to terrorist groups, rogue nations, and criminal syndicates. The BSAA was overwhelmed, governments were panicking, and humanity seemed determined to destroy itself through biological warfare. But there were bright spots. Anomalous reports of bioweapon incidents being resolved before official response teams arrived. Terrorist cells eliminated by unknown operatives. Viral samples mysteriously destroyed before they could be weaponized. Someone, or something, was working in the shadows, hunting bioterrorists with supernatural efficiency. Leon knew who. He'd received anonymous intelligence too many times, seen too many impossible results to deny the pattern. The man in red was still out there, still fighting, still protecting humanity from threats it barely understood. On his desk sat a sealed letter that had arrived through untraceable channels. No postmark, no return address, just expensive paper and elegant handwriting. Officer Kennedy *. You've done well in your new role. The BSAA is fortunate to have agents like you, those who have seen the worst humanity can create and still choose to fight. Continue your work, continue bearing witness, and know that you're not alone in this war. Some monsters hunt other monsters. Some darkness fights to protect the light. The world is more complicated than your training suggested, but you're adapting admirably. Stay alive, Leon. Humanity needs heroes like you far more than it needs creatures like me. A friend from Raccoon City. Leon folded the letter and locked it in his desk drawer alongside the only other physical evidence of that night. A single bullet casing from a .454 casual round, caliber that shouldn't exist, fired from a weapon he'd never seen before. Monsters fighting monsters, he murmured to the empty office. Maybe that's the only way we survive this. Outside his window, Washington, D.C. glittered in twilight. Millions of people living their lives completely unaware of the biological horrors waiting in laboratories and black sites around the world. Unaware that corporate greed had nearly destroyed an entire city. Unaware that things that went bump in the night were sometimes the only thing standing between civilization and apocalypse. Leon stood, holstering his weapon and gathering his files. Another briefing in an hour, another mission being planned, another bioterrorist cell to hunt. The work never ended, but somewhere in the darkness, he knew the man in red was hunting too. And somehow, that made the impossible task feel slightly less impossible. Helsing Manor, present day. ALUCARD stood in the war room one final time, reviewing 3 years of operations since Raccoon City. The board was covered with maps, photographs, and intelligence reports, a visual representation of humanity's ongoing war with bioweapons it had created.
Umbrella was destroyed, its executives imprisoned, its research scattered. But the genie couldn't be put back in the bottle. Bioweapons existed now, acknowledged and feared and pursued by dozens of organizations. Some wanted to destroy them. Others wanted to weaponize them. A few, like the mold in Dobruja, simply wanted to survive. "We haven't won," Integra observed, joining him at the board. "We've just changed the nature of the war, from fighting one corporation to fighting dozens of splinter groups, terrorists, and rogue states." "Wars evolve," ALUCARD replied. "Humanity thought it could control biological evolution through science. Instead, you accelerated it beyond control. Now you're fighting creatures that adapt faster than your weapons can target them." He smiled grimly. "Welcome to the future, where the monsters you create are more dangerous than the ones that existed naturally." "Cheerful as ever," Integra said dryly, lighting a cigar. "Any advice for fighting this new war?" "Same as the old war," Alucard said. "Hunt monsters with monsters, fight fire with fire, and never forget that the line between hero and villain is thinner than anyone wants to admit." He turned to face her fully. "You've changed since Raccoon City, Master. You've become more pragmatic, less dogmatic. You negotiate with sentient fungi and utilize vampire servants. Your grandfather would be horrified." "My grandfather was a fanatic," Integra replied. "I prefer effectiveness over ideology. If that means working with monsters to protect humanity, so be it." She met his ancient gaze steadily. "You were right about something earlier. The world is complicated. Simple answers don't work anymore, if they ever did." "Wisdom," Alucard said approvingly. "Uncomfortable, inconvenient wisdom, but wisdom nonetheless." He began dissolving into shadow, preparing to depart for his next assignment. "I'll be in Prague next week. Reports of enhanced humans displaying abilities beyond standard viral enhancement. Could be Wesker's work." "Be careful," Integra cautioned. "If it is Wesker, he's had 3 years to prepare countermeasures against you." "Good," Alucard said with genuine delight. "I was worried he'd gotten boring. A nemesis who adapts and challenges you is far more entertaining than one who remains static." His form was mostly shadow now, only his eyes remaining visible, 2 points of crimson light in the darkness. "After all, Master, what's immortality worth if you spend it fighting mediocre opponents?" He vanished completely, his laughter echoing through the war room like a promise and a threat. Integra stood alone, surrounded by evidence of humanity's capacity for both horror and heroism. Outside, London slept, unaware that monsters walked its streets, some threatening civilization, others protecting it, and a few doing both simultaneously depending on the night. She stubbed out her cigar and returned to work. The files wouldn't review themselves, the missions wouldn't plan themselves, and the world wouldn't save itself. But at least she had allies in the darkness. Strange, monstrous, morally complicated allies, but allies nonetheless. And in a world where humans created bioweapons, corporations committed genocide, and science unleashed horrors beyond imagining, strange allies were better than facing the darkness alone. The war continued, the monsters evolved, and somewhere between heroism and horror, humanity struggled to survive the apocalypses it had created. Business as usual for Helsing organization. Business as usual for Alucard, the vampire who hunted monsters in a world where the worst monsters wore human faces. Business as usual for a species determined to destroy itself, while simultaneously fighting desperately to survive. The Resident Evil universe had gained a new player, ancient, powerful, and utterly amused by humanity's capacity for self-destruction. And somewhere, Albert Wesker smiled behind his sunglasses, knowing that the next time he met the vampire, their rematch would be legendary. 3 years, 100,000 dead in Raccoon City, Umbrella Corporation destroyed, countless bioweapon incidents across the globe. And through it all, a vampire walked among humanity's nightmares, reminding the world that some monsters predated science and would outlast it. Alucard had arrived in the Resident Evil universe expecting simple bioweapons, mindless zombies, and engineered abominations. What he found was far more disturbing: humanity's capacity to industrialize horror, to transform suffering into profit margins, to create monsters while calling it progress. Umbrella Corporation hadn't just developed bioweapons. They'd revealed something fundamental about human nature: the willingness to sacrifice morality for advancement, to treat lives as data points, to play God without accepting divine responsibility. But he'd also found humanity's resilience. Leon Kennedy surviving his first day, Jill Valentine and Chris Redfield fighting to expose Umbrella despite overwhelming opposition, Integra Helsing adapting her organization's mission to address threats beyond the supernatural. Even in the darkest moments, humans chose to resist, to fight, to bear witness. The bioweapon crisis wouldn't end. Wesker would continue building his new Umbrella empire, seeking to perfect viral enhancement and prove that science could rival the supernatural. Other organizations would pursue bioweapons research, convinced they could control what Umbrella couldn't. Creatures like the mold would wait in forgotten places, patient and alien, ready to inherit Earth if humanity destroyed itself. But ALUCARD would watch, and when bioterrorists crossed lines, when corporations repeated Umbrella's sins, when enhanced humans forgot their humanity, he would intervene, not as hero or savior, but as apex predator maintaining balance in an ecosystem where humans had become their own worst threat. Raccoon City's ashes had taught him something unexpected. Monsters weren't defined by their nature but by their choices. Umbrella's executives were human but monstrous. The mold was alien but negotiated rationally. Wesker was enhanced but retained twisted morality. And Alucard himself, ancient vampire, mass murderer, supernatural abomination, sometimes protected humanity better than humans protected themselves. The irony wasn't lost on him. In the end, Resident Evil's universe gained something it had never possessed: a check against humanity's worst impulses. A predator old enough to recognize patterns, powerful enough to intervene, and nihilistic enough to judge both humans and bioweapons with equal disdain. Whether that made the world safer or simply added another layer of horror was debatable. But one thing was certain: Albert Wesker, the BSAA, and every organization pursuing bioweapons research now operated knowing that something ancient watched from the shadows. Something that had seen empires rise and fall, that had witnessed humanity's greatest atrocities and finest moments, that judged not by species but by actions. Alucard had entered Resident Evil's nightmare, but nightmares, he discovered, were sometimes afraid of the dark. And he was the darkness that even monsters feared. The hunt continued. Evolution marched forward, and in the space between human and monster, a vampire smiled and waited for the next apocalypse humanity would inevitably create. After all, he had eternity to watch humanity destroy and rebuild itself. Umbrella was destroyed, its executives imprisoned, its research scattered, but the genie couldn't be put back in the bottle. Bioweapons existed now, acknowledged and feared and pursued by dozens of organizations. Some wanted to destroy them, others wanted to weaponize them. A few, like the mold in Dobruja, simply wanted to survive. "We haven't won," Integra observed, joining him at the board. "We've just changed the nature of the war, from fighting one corporation to fighting dozens of splinter groups, terrorists, and rogue states." "Wars evolve," Alucard replied. "Humanity thought it could control biological evolution through science. Instead, you accelerated it beyond control. Now you're fighting creatures that adapt faster than your weapons can target them." He smiled grimly. "Welcome to the future, where the monsters you create are more dangerous than the ones that existed naturally." "Cheerful as ever," Integra said dryly, lighting a cigar. "Any advice for fighting this new war?" "Same as the old war," Alucard said. "Hunt monsters with monsters, fight fire with fire, and never forget that the line between hero and villain is thinner than anyone wants to admit." He turned to face her fully. "You've changed since Raccoon City, Master. You've become more pragmatic, less dogmatic. You negotiate with sentient fungi and utilize vampire servants. Your grandfather would be horrified. My grandfather was a fanatic, Integra replied. I prefer effectiveness over ideology. If that means working with monsters to protect humanity, so be it. She met his ancient gaze steadily. You were right about something earlier. The world is complicated. Simple answers don't work anymore, if they ever did. Wisdom, ALUCARD said approvingly. Uncomfortable, inconvenient wisdom, but wisdom nonetheless. He began dissolving into shadow, preparing to depart for his next assignment. I'll be in Prague next week. Reports of enhanced humans displaying abilities beyond standard viral enhancement could be Wesker's work. Be careful, Integra cautioned. If it is Wesker, he's had 3 years to prepare countermeasures against you. Good, ALUCARD said with genuine delight. I was worried he'd gotten boring. A nemesis who adapts and challenges you is far more entertaining than one who remains static. His form was mostly shadow now, only his eyes remaining visible, 2 points of crimson light in the darkness. After all, Master, what's immortality worth if you spend it fighting mediocre opponents? He vanished completely, his laughter echoing through the war room like a promise and a threat. Integra stood alone, surrounded by evidence of humanity's capacity for both horror and heroism. Outside, London slept, unaware that monsters walked its streets, some threatening civilization, others protecting it, and a few doing both simultaneously depending on the night. She stubbed out her cigar and returned to work. The files wouldn't review themselves, the missions wouldn't plan themselves, and the world wouldn't save itself. But at least she had allies in the darkness. Strange, monstrous, morally complicated allies, but allies nonetheless. And in a world where humans created bioweapons, corporations committed genocide, and science unleashed horrors beyond imagining, strange allies were better than facing the darkness alone. The war continued, the monsters evolved, and somewhere between heroism and horror, humanity struggled to survive the apocalypses it had created. Business as usual for Helsing Organization. Business as usual for ALUCARD, the vampire who hunted monsters in a world where the worst monsters wore human faces. Business as usual for a species determined to destroy itself, while simultaneously fighting desperately to survive. The Resident Evil universe had gained a new player, ancient, powerful, and utterly amused by humanity's capacity for self-destruction. And somewhere, Albert Wesker smiled behind his sunglasses, knowing that the next time he met the vampire, their rematch would be legendary. 3 years, 100,000 dead in Raccoon City, Umbrella Corporation destroyed, countless bioweapon incidents across the globe. And through it all, a vampire walked among humanity's nightmares, reminding the world that some monsters predated science and would outlast it. ALUCARD had arrived in the Resident Evil universe expecting simple bioweapons, mindless zombies, and engineered abominations. What he found was far more disturbing. Humanity's capacity to industrialize horror, to transform suffering into profit margins, to create monsters while calling it progress. Umbrella Corporation hadn't just developed bioweapons. They'd revealed something fundamental about human nature, the willingness to sacrifice morality for advancement, to treat lives as data points, to play God without accepting divine responsibility. But he'd also found humanity's resilience. Leon Kennedy surviving his first day, Jill Valentine and Chris Redfield fighting to expose Umbrella despite overwhelming opposition, Integra Helsing adapting her organization's mission to address threats beyond the supernatural. Even in the darkest moments, humans chose to resist, to fight, to bear witness. The bioweapon crisis wouldn't end. Wesker would continue building his new Umbrella empire, seeking to perfect viral enhancement and prove that science could rival the supernatural. Other organizations would pursue bioweapons research, convinced they could control what Umbrella couldn't. Creatures like the mold would wait in forgotten places, patient and alien, ready to inherit Earth if humanity destroyed itself. But ALUCARD would watch, and when bioterrorists crossed lines, when corporations repeated Umbrella's sins, when enhanced humans forgot their humanity, he would intervene, not as hero or savior, but as apex predator maintaining balance in an ecosystem where humans had become their own worst threat. Raccoon City's ashes had taught him something unexpected. Monsters weren't defined by their nature but by their choices. Umbrella's executives were human but monstrous. The mold was alien but negotiated rationally. Wesker was enhanced but retained twisted morality. And Alucard himself, ancient vampire, mass murderer, supernatural abomination, sometimes protected humanity better than humans protected themselves. The irony wasn't lost on him. In the end, Resident Evil's universe gained something it had never possessed: a check against humanity's worst impulses. A predator old enough to recognize patterns, powerful enough to intervene, and nihilistic enough to judge both humans and bioweapons with equal disdain. Whether that made the world safer or simply added another layer of horror was debatable. But one thing was certain: Albert Wesker, the BSAA, and every organization pursuing bioweapons research now operated knowing that something ancient watched from the shadows. Something that had seen empires rise and fall, that had witnessed humanity's greatest atrocities and finest moments, that judged not by species but by actions. Alucard had entered Resident Evil's nightmare, but nightmares, he discovered, were sometimes afraid of the dark. And he was the darkness that even monsters feared. The hunt continued. Evolution marched forward, and in the space between human and monster, a vampire smiled and waited for the next apocalypse humanity would inevitably create. After all, he had eternity to watch humanity destroy and rebuild itself.